Xiaofan's Wuxia Tales. Chapter 5406. However, it was not Yu Tianchang's style to retreat without a fight. Finally, we can have a decisive battle. Yu Tianchang pursed her lips and smiled. She recalled the first time she met Kong Xinmu. At that time, Kong Xinmu was too weak compared to Yu Tianchang. However, Yu Tianchang had already seen his potential. Then, Kong Xinmu left Donghuang Yanwu College and went to Emperor Shi's Dragon Martial Arts Academy. At this moment, Yu Yaji was the dean of Emperor Shi's Dragon Martial Arts Academy in the Dragon Martial Arts continent, and Yu Tianchang was her relative. Anyway, the relationship between Kong Xinmu and Yu Tianchang was quite close, and they were almost inseparable. Without Yu Tianchang, there would be no Kong Xinmu. Kong Xinmu knew this very well. Although he had become stronger and had even gained a foothold in the Dragon God's macro world, he was still grateful to Yu Tianchang. Of course, being grateful didn't mean that he would go easy on her and lose the battle on purpose. This was a fair competition. Yu Tianchang's divine dragon bloodline was the heavenly phoenix feather dragon, and her strength was beyond doubt. But now, Kong Xinmu was even stronger. In the desert, the two sides fought. Yu Tianchang didn't hesitate at all. She burst out a terrible power and swept it toward Kong Xinmu. Kong Xinmu was still very cautious. He took the opportunity to use the desperate sky screen. The pitch-black devouring power condensed into a desperate sky screen and blocked Yu Tianchang's attack. At the same time, the God shield condensed by Kong Xinmu's power surrounded his body and protected his divine dragon body. Divine Dragon Tyrant Body Technique. Kong Xinmu switched the Divine Dragon Tyrant Body Technique to the Guardian mode. At this moment, although his defense had not reached its limit, it was not something that could be broken by an ordinary opponent at the same level. The other Dragon Emperor pinnacle powerhouses were no match for him. Even though Yu Tianchang was already at Transcendent God Stage 2, it was still difficult for her to break through Kong Xinmu's defense. But Yu Tianchang's tyrannical attack transformed into countless heavenly clothes and phoenix feathers that glowed with a golden light. With a loud rumble, they swept toward Kong Xinmu's God Wind. The terrifying attack actually shook Kong Xinmu's God Shield. This was something that Kong Xinmu had not expected. Although he hadn't switched the formless weapon Chen Xing's battle runes to defensive battle runes, his current defense was second only to his own at his limit. The fact that Yu Tianchang's attack could shake his defense was no easy feat, so powerful. Little did he know that at this moment, Yu Tianchang was even more surprised than Kong Xinmu. After all, she was at Transcendent God Stage 2. The Super Divine Dragon bloodline was already much stronger than Kong Xinmu's Dragon Emperor. Moreover, she had already cultivated the Super Divine Dragon technique to the Sacred Tier. Although it had not reached the Sacred Tier, it was still the highest level of the Super Divine Dragon technique. In addition, Yu Tianchang's killer move, as a heavenly clothes phoenix feather dragon, the Divine Dragon bloodline inheritance had extremely strong explosive power. Coupled with Yu Tianchang's own explosive dragon technique, it was a double explosive power. In other words, the attack of Yu Tianchang's heavenly clothes phoenix feather dragon was something that even an ordinary Transcendent God Stage 4 dragon martial artist could not withstand. If she did not have such a powerful attack, she would not have been able to come all the way here. However, after encountering Kong Xinmu, powerless. This was how Yu Tianchang felt now. Too powerless. Although her attack strength was considered to be at the peak of Transcendent God Stage 2, she still felt powerless when facing Kong Xinmu. It was no wonder that Kong Xinmu could become number 1 among the Grade 5 disciples. His strength was simply too terrifying. Of course, Yu Tianchang also knew that Kong Xinmu was the best at defense. Therefore, she was not too surprised. Instead, she immediately unleashed an even stronger attack, wave after wave, again and again. Yu Tianchang did not give Kang Xinmu any chance to catch his breath. Endless power poured down on Kang Xinmu's pitch-black divine dragon body. As for Kang Xinmu, he was still in a state of defense. He did not counterattack, nor did he use the extreme destructive Heaven's Might Dragon Soul. After all, the power of the super divine dragon technique needed some time to be unleashed. He was now familiarizing himself with the method he was about to use. Devouring the opponent's attack strength and counterattacking. After Yu Tianchang attacked Kang Xinmu 5 times in a row, Kang Xinmu's devouring power had devoured at least 2 of her complete attack strength. This strength was completely transformed into the devouring power in his body. Then, it merged with a violent momentum and burst out. Yu Tianchang could barely react. Kang Xinmu's attack was too fast. Moreover, it was just as she was about to launch her next attack. She could not move. The super strong power collided with the power of her dragon technique in midair. In the end, Kang Xinmu's devouring power turned into a pitch-black power and completely defeated Yu Tianchang's attack. Then, the power roared out violently and engulfed Yu Tianchang's heavenly phoenix feather dragon body. The winner had been decided. At the last moment, Yu Tianchang tried to use her dragon-like body technique to travel through space. Unfortunately, Kang Xinmu's attack was too fast. Before she could travel through space, she was already enveloped by Kang Xinmu's power. Fortunately, they were in the simulated space of the Dragon Soul Holy Tower. Otherwise, Yu Tianchang would have completely lost her breath. Kang Xinmu won. Then, Yu Tianchang appeared outside the Dragon Soul Holy Tower. Her journey was over. She looked at the magnificent Dragon Soul Holy Tower in front of her, as well as some dragon warriors who appeared outside the tower, and smiled bitterly. She could not compare with Kang Xinmu's current level. That boy was growing too fast, wasn't he? In the assembly hall of the Dragon Soul Holy Tower, Jiang Shenwu appeared here, and at the same time, he saw a few familiar figures. The one he paid more attention to was Hakuin from the secret Death Holy Land. This blonde girl seemed to have returned to the outside a long time ago. Kang Xinmu defeated Yu Tianchang after receiving 5 attacks from her. But this blonde girl, Hakuin, probably defeated her opponent in one move as soon as she entered the tower. She was even more straightforward than Yi Yin. If there was any relationship between them, Kang Xinmu felt that Hakuin was probably Yi Yin's elder sister. Judging from Hakuin's appearance, she had a strong personality. It should not be wrong to say that she was his elder sister. Of course, Kang Xinmu would not go up to talk to Hakuin. After all, they did not know each other yet. But Hakuin was still squinting and paying attention to Kang Xinmu from time to time. She seemed to be very interested in Kang Xinmu. Then, Kang Xinmu began to observe the others around him. Kang Xinmu did not see Gu Yusheng and Feng Ligei again. They were probably defeated in the first round. There were so many powerful dragon warriors present, and they were basically at the 3rd level of Supreme God. It was already not easy for them to stay until now. It was not an easy task to move forward. Chapter 5407. Gu Xinyue was able to win a match. This surprised Kang Xinmu. After all, Gu Xinyue was only at the peak of the Dragon Emperor realm. According to the battle order of the Dragon Soul Holy Tower, she, who was at the lowest realm, would basically be matched against someone with a higher realm. It was highly likely that she would be matched against someone at the 3rd stage of the Transcendent God realm. However, such an opponent had actually been defeated by her hands. This was something Kang Xinmu did not expect. He and Gu Xinyue looked at each other and smiled. It seems like the nightmare illusory dragon is indeed very powerful, especially when dealing with opponents with complicated thoughts. Kang Xinmu thought to himself. Gu Xinyue's nightmare illusory dragon bloodline had almost completely erupted after obtaining the psychedelic star crystal. It might not have been obvious under normal circumstances. Under normal circumstances, it could not be seen, but at certain times, it could bring about quite a good effect. She had even defeated a transcendent God Stage 3 opponent. This undoubtedly shocked everyone present. The peak of the Dragon Emperor realm? She could actually defeat her opponent and enter the next round. In other words, a girl at the peak of the Dragon Emperor realm actually became the top 32 of the Class 6 disciples. It was too shocking. It should be known that those who were able to enter the top 100 of the 6th class disciples were already the best among the 6th class disciples. On average, almost every one of them could become one of the best among the 6th class disciples in their respective holy lands. However, she was actually defeated by a girl at the peak of the Dragon Emperor realm? Something unexpected finally happened. Everyone was sizing up Gu Xinyue, wanting to know what was so special about her. Meanwhile, Gu Xinyue was feeling nervous because she was able to defeat her opponent completely because of the power of the Nightmare Illusory Dragon. This kind of power was more effective against men. If she were to face a woman next, she might not be able to continue. On the other hand, Kong Shinmu, Gu Xinyue had high hopes for Kong Shinmu. Although Kong Shinmu was also at the peak of the Dragon Emperor, his ability to fight head-on was still much stronger than hers. He might be able to fight against the strongest guys among the 6th class disciples present. No matter what, the competition continued. In the third round, the top 32 would continue to battle. As everyone was enveloped by the white pillar of light, they arrived at their respective battlegrounds. It was an independent small world, and it was impossible for anyone else to interfere with the battle between the two of them. Kong Shinmu's opponent was a middle-aged woman at Transcendent God Stage 3. She had a fire element innate power. Seeing this opponent, Kong Shinmu heaved a sigh of relief. It seemed that the strongest existence hadn't been arranged for him. The middle-aged woman in front of him wasn't too strong for Kong Shinmu, but she wasn't too weak either. At the very least, she was a bit stronger than Yu Tianchang. As for how much stronger they were, they could only find out after fighting. On the other side, Gu Xinyue opened her eyes and saw that her opponent was one of the strongest among the remaining 32, the golden-haired girl, Hakuin. When Hakuin saw that Gu Xinyue was her opponent, she didn't look down on her. Instead, she was a little surprised. Moreover, she seemed to be very curious. She even asked, "You're from the 5 extreme mysterious ice holy land, right? You know Kong Shinmu, right?" "Yes." Gu Xinyue answered without hesitation. At the same time, she became a little wary. This golden-haired girl, Hakuin, seemed to be quite interested in Kong Shinmu. She had to pay attention to this. Putting her power aside for now, the most important thing was that Bai Yin was simply too beautiful. Although she wasn't much better than Gu Xinyue in terms of style, Gu Xinyue would still be careful even if they were at the same level of beauty. She really liked Kong Shinmu. If this Hakuin was interested in Kong Shinmu, she might even try to seduce Kong Shinmu. Gu Xinyue was always very careful and guarded against the women who appeared around Kong Shinmu. Yu Tianchang and the other two were like that. However, Gu Xinyue realized that Kong Shinmu didn't have any ambiguous relationship with them. They were just ordinary friends. But this Hakuin was different. Most importantly, this Hakuin seemed to be very interested in Kong Shinmu. Therefore, Gu Xinyue directly said that she knew Kong Shinmu. In this way, it was equivalent to declaring her sovereignty in front of Hakuin. It seems that Kong Shinmu is indeed famous in your holy land of 5 extremes dark ice. Hakuin pursed her lips and smiled. With her golden hair, she looked extremely beautiful when she smiled. With her sharp senses, she even sensed that there seemed to be a rather special relationship between Gu Xinyue and Kong Shinmu. Hakuin didn't care about this. She only wanted to see how powerful Kong Shinmu was. Since that was the case, she would first beat Gu Xinyue out. the battle began. Against the golden-haired girl, Gu Xinyue's nightmare dragon was still useful, but it wasn't very useful. Therefore, Gu Xinyue, whose true strength was only at the peak of the Dragon Emperor, wasn't a match for Hakuin at all in a head-on battle. After all, Hakuin was in existence at the third stage of the Transcendent God stage. Moreover, her combat strength was simply too strong. At the start, Gu Xinyue still used the innate ability of the Nightmare Dragon to restrict Hakuin's performance. But very quickly, Hakuin broke through the restriction of the Nightmare Dragon's innate ability and exploded. Gu Xinyue was defeated. Hakuin was one of the fastest to defeat her opponent. When she returned to the hall, she found that Kang Xinmu hadn't come out yet. In fact, there was no one else in the hall. After a while, someone else appeared in the hall and ended the battle. Hakuin had been waiting all this time. There were already 11 people in the hall when Kang Xinmu finally appeared in front of Hakuin. The speed at which he defeated his opponent was obviously not much. In fact, it was slightly slow. This made Hakuin a little confused about Kang Xinmu's combat strength. However, she had obviously heard about some of Kang Xinmu's combat strength from Yi Yin. Combined with the fact that Kang Xinmu's speed at defeating his opponent seemed to be relatively slow, then she had a better understanding of the combat style of Kang Xinmu led by Hakuin. In fact, Yi Yin didn't tell Hakuin too much about Kang Xinmu. After all, although Yi Yin and Hakuin had a good relationship, in fact, there was definitely a competitive relationship between them. Yi Yin also wanted to see what kind of expression Hakuin would have if she lost to a Dragon Emperor at his peak, which was Kang Xinmu. At first, when Yi Yin told Hakuin that Kang Xinmu was very strong, Hakuin didn't pay much attention to it. And until now, Hakuin didn't particularly care about Kang Xinmu. It was just because of Yi Yin that she paid more attention to Kang Xinmu. As for Kang Xinmu's strength, she didn't think it would be too strong. A defensive type of combat style? Unfortunately, he met me. A mere Dragon Emperor at his peak will never have a chance to defend. Chapter 5408. Kang Xinmu didn't know that Gu Xinyue would encounter Hakuin. If they met, he would definitely be no match for her. On the other hand, Kang Xinmu defeated his opponent very smoothly. Although it wasn't particularly fast, it was still very stable. Kang Xinmu's current combat power wasn't overwhelming. Among the dragon martial artists of this realm, his combat power wasn't considered high. If he wanted to defeat his opponent, he could only rely on the devouring power. And there was only one way to win. When Kang Xinmu returned to the hall, he found that the others were already there. There were only 16 people left in the hall. And Kang Xinmu was the last one to appear in the hall. After all, Kang Xinmu had devoured a lot of his opponent's power to finally defeat his opponent. Therefore, it was completely normal for him to spend more time. When Kang Xinmu appeared, everyone looked at him. Then, the eyes of most of the dragon warriors were filled with shock. This guy was at the peak of the Dragon Emperor realm. He actually made it this far. In the third round, he actually defeated 2 opponents in a row and became one of the top 16. This was too shocking. Was this brat stronger than expected, or were the opponents this brat was assigned to be too weak? According to the situation in the Dragon Soul Holy Tower, it was usually the weak against the strong. There wouldn't be a situation where the weak would be grouped together and the strong eliminated each other. They didn't understand. However, Hakuin found it even more interesting. The more outstanding Kang Xinmu's performance was, the funnier it was to her. After all, Yi Yin admired Kang Xinmu very much. And Hakuin's favorite hobby was to defeat Yi Yin. If she could defeat Kang Xinmu, whom Yi Yin admired, easily, wouldn't it be great? Then, the next battle began. A white light flashed before Kang Xinmu's eyes. Then, he came to the sky above a dense forest. A brand new world, a brand new opponent. It was an old man. Unlike the previous battles between the several ranks of disciples, there were already many older dragon martial artists in the battle of the 6th rank disciples. After all, the 6th rank disciple stage was already the limit of many dragon martial artists' cultivation in this lifetime. Although 5th grade and 4th grade disciples were the limits of some dragon warriors, generally speaking, 4th grade and 5th grade disciples were the limits of dragon warriors, their cultivation talent was not very good. Therefore, it was very difficult for the older 4th and 5th class disciples to reach the end. But 6th grade disciples were different. At least half of the top 16 that Kang Xinmu saw were youngsters. Of course, even if one looked young on the surface, there was no telling how old they were. As long as they broke through at a relatively young age, it would be easy for them to maintain their youthful appearance. Moreover, the later the competition between the 7th and 8th class disciples, the older dragon martial artists would definitely make up a larger portion of the competition. This was without a doubt. Kang Xinmu's opponent in the top 16 battle was an old man. This old man was wearing a grey robe. It was not clear which holy land he came from, but Kang Xinmu could feel that he was very strong. He was at least equivalent to a 5th stage transcendent god. This old man was one of the 6th class disciples who had effortlessly blocked the attack of a 5th stage transcendent god. This person appeared in the small world and only glanced at Kang Xinmu. His deep eyes were as calm as an ancient well. Obviously, this old man did not feel the slightest bit of emotion that his opponent was Kang Xinmu. He was not surprised, nor did he underestimate. He just treated Kang Xinmu as a normal opponent. Obviously, this kind of older opponent was very difficult to deal with. Generally speaking, they were very knowledgeable and had a very calm mentality. When faced with any situation, they could analyze it to their best advantage. A 3rd stage transcendent god elder. This old man had obviously stayed at the 3rd stage transcendent god for a long time. His combat power had completely surpassed that of an ordinary 3rd stage transcendent god. Immediately after, this old man transformed into an earth element divine dragon, Wild Sand Brilliant Sword Dragon. He did not expect this old man to be a 6th class disciple of the Wild Sand Brilliant Sword Holy Land. Kang Xinmu was not too surprised. No matter who his opponent was, he had to deal with it in his best condition and defeat his opponent. Dragon Transformation. The body of the Black Divine Dragon followed closely behind and appeared in mid-air. Immediately after, both sides actually displayed their defensive dragon martial skills, and then collided in mid-air. Terrifying power burst forth with waves of energy vortexes. The Wild Sand Brilliant Sword Dragon's defense was indeed very strong, but its attack could not be ignored. While defending, there were many earth element sword lights sweeping towards Kang Xinmu. Kang Xinmu did not care. His devouring power erupted and directly swallowed the earth element sword lights. Very quickly. The strength of both sides was about the same. Although Kang Xinmu was only at the pinnacle of the Dragon Emperor, he was much stronger in other aspects. After all, Kang Xinmu could be said to have specialized in defense and body-refining dragon skills. Therefore, in terms of defense, he was not inferior to the old man. However, in terms of attack, he was clearly much weaker, although Kang Xinmu's attack was very weak, to the point that the old man did not even feel the slightest bit of pressure. The old man did not relax his defense. However, the old man, who was originally focused on defense, began to erupt with a portion of his attack to try to attack Kang Xinmu. As expected of an older dragon martial artist, his combat experience was extremely rich. Even in this kind of crushing battle between a 3rd stage transcendent god and a pinnacle dragon emperor, he did not underestimate his opponent at all. If this old man wasn't overly cautious, then he must have encountered something in the past that made him so cautious. Of course, being cautious was not a bad thing. However, it was too much to be cautious in front of Kang Xinmu. This was because the more time dragged on, the more advantageous it would be for Kang Xinmu. Now, Kang Xinmu had completely devoured his opponent's earth element power, allowing his own resistance to earth element power to reach its strongest state. Under such circumstances, as long as Kang Xinmu entered a state of complete defense, it would be impossible for him to be defeated by his opponent. This old man's defense was very strong, and his attack was also very strong. However, they were both around the standard of a fifth-stage transcendent god. Even if he used the Transcendent God Dragon weapon and activated the Transcendent God Dragon skill, it was still the same. To be able to fight someone 2 levels above him, this old man was considered one of the best among the third-stage Transcendent God Dragon martial artists. He was indeed one of the 16 strongest among the 6th-stage disciples of the more than 100 holy lands of the dragon gods. However, Kang Xinmu was even more terrifying than him. At the pinnacle of the Dragon Emperor, Kang Xinmu's defense had already reached the level of a 5th-stage transcendent god. In fact, it could even be stronger than this. Under a state of complete defense, unless it was a true 5th-stage transcendent god, it would not be that difficult to break through Kang Xinmu's defense. Chapter 5409. Kang Xinmu had already devoured enough power in the midst of his constant defense. These powers were all transformed into a devouring power, but it was several times the power of that old man's attack. Kang Xinmu was looking for an opportunity not long after. That old man's state of mind was still calm, but seeing that his attack on Kang Xinmu was completely ineffective, he also became a little anxious. He wanted to defeat Kang Xinmu as soon as possible. After all, Kang Xinmu was only at the peak of the Dragon Emperor. Even if he was competing with Kang Xinmu in terms of energy consumption, he also guessed that Kang Xinmu should be almost exhausted. Hence, just as this old man's state of mind was a little anxious, Kang Xinmu suddenly made a move. An incomparably tyrannical power erupted at this time. This power was all condensed by Kang Xinmu when he devoured all of that old man's attack previously, devour, counterattack. That old man completely did not expect that Kang Xinmu still had such a horrifying attack method, and could not react for a moment. However, his movements were still extremely fast. At the same time that Jiang Shenwu erupted with power, he had already displayed his most powerful defensive dragon martial skill. Waves of yellow sand sword light erupted at this moment, surrounding the body of the wild sand brilliant sword dragon that the old man transformed into, protecting him. However, the power that Kang Xinmu erupted this time exceeded his expectations. His yellow sand sword light defense actually had no way of resisting under Kang Xinmu's devouring power. In the next instant, these powers landed with a loud rumble, drowning the entire body of the wild sand brilliant sword dragon. Kang Xinmu's attack was decisive and swift, not giving that old man the slightest chance to resist. But the power of Kang Xinmu's attack this time was also greatly offset by the waves of yellow sand sword light. Even when it landed on the body of the wild sand brilliant sword dragon, there was already not much left. Fortunately, the wild sand brilliant sword dragon did not cultivate any body-tempering dragon martial technique. Therefore, when Kang Xinmu's power took form and crashed down, it still blasted many wounds on his opponent's divine dragon body. Then, Kang Xinmu's devouring power surged in and corroded it. It was time to devour the essence of flesh and blood. At this moment, it was time for Kang Xinmu to gain victory. However, at this moment, he still had to guard against his opponent's counterattack. After all, he had just started devouring, so he couldn't restrict his opponent's strength too much. Once his opponent erupted with a trump card attack, there was still a possibility that he could defeat Kang Xinmu. However, the old man in front of him clearly did not have any tricks up his sleeves. Of course, he still had his trump cards, but even if he used them, he still couldn't break through Kang Xinmu's strongest defense. At this moment, Kang Xinmu had activated his strongest defense. Not only did the divine dragon tyrant body art display a defensive stance, but his divine dragon body was also surrounded by the divine shield. The despair canopy was also constantly being used, and even the dragon soldier Chen Xing was completely transformed into a defensive battle pattern. Therefore, now that Kong Shinmu was fully armed, the old man in front of him really couldn't break through Kong Shinmu's defense. Next, it was time for the old man to despair. This old man, a 6th grade disciple of the Wild Sand Brilliant Sword Holy Land, had never seen Kong Shinmu's fighting style. Although he had only suffered a minor injury, but that power just now seemed to be related to him? Did this kid absorb his power? Also, he had only suffered a minor injury, but he felt a strange power corroding his body, causing his life force to continuously flow away. This was the most terrifying thing. Moreover, he found that he couldn't get rid of the strange power that was corroding his body at all. It was too terrifying. This kid's fighting style is interconnected. If it weren't for his minor injury, this kid wouldn't have a way to defeat me. But the attack that he condensed just now broke through my defense. The old man realized that Kong Shinmu was difficult to deal with and powerful. This was the first time he had seen such a terrifying dragon emperor at his peak. If he was in those middle-grade relics, this kid would definitely be invincible. The old man shook his head. In the end, when he felt that his divine dragon body was getting weaker and weaker, and it was even more impossible for him to defeat Kong Shinmu, he chose to recognize him. Although he came from the Wild Sand Brilliant Sword Holy Land, this old man really hadn't participated in the siege of the 5 Extreme Dark Ice Holy Land. This old man in the Wild Sand Brilliant Sword Holy Land could be considered to have been cultivating in seclusion. Moreover, because he was older, he rarely went out to train. He really didn't know much about the outside world. The new generation surpasses the old. The old man sighed and then admitted defeat. As Kong Shinmu returned to the hall, there were only 8 people left in the entire hall. These were the top 8 6th grade disciples in the entire Dragon God's great world, among more than 100 holy lands. As expected, Gu Xinyue wasn't here. Kong Shinmu didn't think too much about it. Although she didn't make it to the end, Gu Xinyue's cultivation was, after all, only at the peak of the Dragon Emperor. It was already quite difficult for her to make it to the top 16, let alone have a chance to compete for the top 10. In any case, Kong Shinmu had to focus on the next battle. There were still 8 people left. One was Kong Shinmu, one was Hakuin, and among the other 6, there were 2 young people, a man and a woman, 2 old men, and 2 middle-aged men. This age distribution was quite even. Among these people, Kong Shinmu and Hakuin were undoubtedly the most eye-catching. That was because they were the youngest and the strongest of them all. Of course, for the others, Hakuin was their final opponent. As for Kong Shinmu, they were slightly surprised that Kong Shinmu could make it to this stage. Obviously, not everyone had a certain understanding of Kong Shinmu. Among the remaining 8 people, apart from Kong Shinmu himself, only Hakuin cared a little about him. Of course, it didn't mean that Hakuin was very cautious. She only knew a little about Kong Shinmu's strength and that Kong Shinmu was the first among the 5th grade disciples. But now, it was the competition of the 6th grade disciples. Hakuin thought, I can't let Kong Shinmu get the first place in the competition of the 6th grade disciples, can I? It would be best if I meet this Kong Shinmu in the next battle. Hakuin thought. Anyway, there were only 8 people left in the hall. Everyone wanted to be the strongest one. Even among the 8 people, their combat strength was almost the same. No one could say that they would win for sure because they were all at the peak of the 6th grade disciples. It was very difficult to crush the others, unless they had the same opportunity as Kong Shinmu. Only then could they crush the other 5th grade disciples, but among the 6th grade disciples, there was obviously no one who had the same opportunity as Kong Shinmu. The next round begins. My opponent is. Chapter 54:10. His opponent this time was a middle-aged man. This middle-aged man's combat power was very stable. He was a transcendent god stage 4 expert and came from a holy land that Kang Shinmu had never come into contact with before. This holy land was famous for its metal-type power and its attack power was very strong. It could be said that if Kang Shinmu wanted to become the first among the grade 6 disciples, the biggest obstacle would be this person. This was because he had the ability to defeat Kang Shinmu in one blow. This fellow's strongest attack could probably reach the level of a Transcendent God Stage 6 or even the level of a Transcendent God Stage 7 expert. Of course, this was also the opponent's peak attack. He could not maintain this state forever. However, this was enough to threaten Kang Shinmu. Kang Shinmu and the middle-aged man appeared in a mountain range. In the mountains, they each transformed into a divine dragon. Kang Shinmu transformed into a black divine dragon, while the middle-aged man transformed into a sword chi divine dragon that shone with golden light. The opponent was a transcendent god stage 4 divine dragon. Therefore, in terms of aura, he completely suppressed Kang Shinmu. However, no one who could reach this stage was a fool. Therefore, this middle-aged man attached great importance to Jiang Shenwu. He was very clear that a mere peak dragon monarch was able to make it all the way until now. He definitely had some ability. Perhaps he had some trump card that could kill, although he did not know how Kang Shinmu did it, he did not underestimate Kang Shinmu at all. This also led to him not attacking Kang Shinmu immediately after he transformed into a dragon. Instead, he was looking for an opportunity. Not planning to attack me? This person is cautious. Unfortunately, the corners of Kang Shinmu's mouth curled up slightly. If he were the other party, he would have burst out with a storm-like attack at the first moment and defeated him with his peak strength. If this dragged on, it would become more and more difficult to defeat Kang Shinmu. However, the opponent was cautious and did not attack. It was impossible for Kang Shinmu to defeat the opponent. He could only say that it all depended on how the other party was going to make a move. Kang Shinmu directly switched to his guardian stance and also transformed the formless weapon Chen Xing into the defensive battle rune state, upgrading himself to the strongest defensive state. At the same time, the God Astral Dragon technique condensed countless God Astral and the canopy of despair enveloped Jiang Shenwu and protected him. This is defense? When the middle-aged man saw this, he frowned slightly. He was puzzled. He had always felt that if the Dragon Emperor wanted to reach this level at his peak, he must have had some unexpected means. If he continued to defend like this, wouldn't he lose in the end? Could it be the counterattack talent? This middle-aged man was quite knowledgeable and had seen some counterattack type talents. When dealing with the counterattack talent, the stronger the power, the easier it was to hurt oneself. Therefore, he had to first use the weaker dragon martial skill to exhaust his opponent's strength, and then look for an opportunity to kill him in one strike. Therefore, based on his previous experience, the middle-aged man decided to first launch a less powerful attack on Kang Shinmu to test him. Suddenly, the golden sword light divine dragon swept over with a terrifying golden sword light. Under the unparalleled golden light, it actually had the strength of a level 5 supreme god. All of Kang Shinmu's defensive power was gathered together, and the pitch-black canopy of despair appeared, blocking the opponent's golden sword gleam. No counterattack? To the middle-aged man's surprise, Kang Shinmu did not launch a counterattack in the face of his attack. However, he could also see that Kang Shinmu seemed to have reached his limit. His level 5 Supreme God attack had already made Kang Shinmu almost unable to hold on. The canopy of despair was even shaking continuously, and it could shatter at any time. Interesting. Is it because I can't break through his defense, so he didn't launch a counterattack talent? If the counterattack talent wanted to be effective, it had to be unexpected. Therefore, now the middle-aged man guessed that Kang Shinmu was waiting for an opportunity. What a pity, he felt that he would not give Kang Shinmu any chance. Then, the entire place exploded with golden light. Omnidirectional Golden Divine Sword. From the body of the Golden Divine Dragon, an extremely bright and dazzling golden light erupted. Then, countless divine swords shot out like a golden rain of arrows, sweeping towards Kang Shinmu from all directions. This was a super divine dragon martial skill that had been cultivated to the supreme sage level. The strength of its attack had at least reached the level of a level 6 supreme god. Moreover, the middle-aged man had also activated a super divine dragon weapon, increasing the power of the omnidirectional golden divine sword by several times. Facing such a powerful attack, Kang Shinmu would probably not be able to block it with his own strength. If he was in the outside world, Kang Shinmu could use the power of the star inheritance to hide in another void. Unfortunately, he was unable to use the power of the starry sky inheritance. Even his understanding of the space-type void force had been weakened. As a result, he was unable to create an independent space to hide in before the omnidirectional golden divine sword arrived. He could only take it head-on. Brilliant Gem. This was the only way for Kang Shinmu. The opponent's attack was too fierce. If Kang Shinmu were to block it head-on, all his defenses would definitely be destroyed. If the opponent attacked again, Kang Shinmu might not be able to block it. Therefore, he could only activate the Brilliant Gem. When the Brilliant Gem appeared, a golden light condensed and spread around Kang Shinmu's divine dragon body. The golden light formed a protective light shield and collided with the surrounding omnidirectional golden divine sword. Golden energy ripples suddenly exploded and spread wildly in all directions like a golden storm. This time, even the defensive barrier formed by the Brilliant Gem was shaken. In the past, once Kang Shinmu activated the Brilliant Gem, he could block all attacks steadily. But now, the Brilliant Gem could not take it. The opponent was too strong. After all, he was a top Supreme God Stage 4 expert. On the previous battlefield, he would also be a big shot. Even when Kang Shinmu was training and using the power of the star inheritance, he might not be a match for the opponent. But now, Kang Shinmu had become stronger. Although he was still at the Dragon Emperor's peak, his experience and training in the Dragon Emperor's Holy Pagoda had increased his strength by several times. At this moment, although the defensive barrier of the Brilliant Gem was shaken, Kang Shinmu's devouring power had already been activated. At this moment, he was devouring the opponent's omnidirectional golden divine sword into his body and turning it into his own strength. Moreover, he was accumulating power and brewing it. At the same time, Kang Shinmu's resistance to the opponent's elemental power was increased to the limit. This was the strength of his devouring power. The speed of his devouring power was increased to the limit. In a short period of time, he could increase his defense. Chapter 54:11. Countless golden light divine swords shot toward him. If Kang Shinmu's defense had been as strong as it was at the beginning, he would not have been able to withstand such a terrifying attack at this moment. Fortunately, Kang Shinmu had already devoured enough metal attribute resistance through his devouring power. At this moment, the countless swords that shot towards him finally failed to penetrate Kang Shinmu's entire body. If it had been before, these golden swords would have sliced Kang Shinmu's entire body into pieces. However, Kang Shinmu's entire body had been slashed by the golden swords now, and there were only countless sword marks that were so deep that his bones could be seen. Moreover, these sword scars were rapidly recovering. Whether it was Kang Shinmu's despair canopy, the surrounding god shield, or even the formless weapon Chen Xing's defensive battle rune transformation, none of them could withstand the opponent's attack at all. Even his defensive stance could not withstand it completely. Kang Shinmu's defense could be said to have directly collapsed in the face of the golden sword Qi. However, he still managed to survive in the end. At this moment, he was recovering at the fastest speed possible. The combination of the Dark Dragon Imperial Filth technique that had been cultivated to the Sage level and Kang Shinmu's devouring power produced an unparalleled recovery speed. The golden sword marks on the surface of his divine dragon body were recovering at a speed visible to the naked eye. However, the opponent's omnidirectional golden divine sword was not so easy to deal with. Although the golden sword marks were continuously recovering, a large portion of the sword's power had also invaded Kang Shinmu's body and started to destroy the inside of his divine dragon body. Without a doubt, if Kang Shinmu did not have the devouring power, he would have almost been defeated at this moment. This was because without the devouring power, he would not be able to devour the power of the golden swords that had invaded his body. This way, his injuries would become more and more serious, and the opponent's attacks would become more and more fierce. If this went on, how could he be a match for the opponent? However, the devouring power was indeed Kang Shinmu's trump card. At this moment, only the devouring power could help Kang Shinmu face this predicament. Taking advantage of his opponent's momentary daze, Kang Shinmu immediately unleashed all of his spatial attribute void energy, creating an independent space on the spot. His understanding of the spatial attribute void energy was quite high. Even if he blocked his use of the starry sky inheritance, he was still able to create an independent space extremely quickly. At that critical moment, it was too late. But now, Kang Shinmu still seized the opportunity. Since he wasn't defeated in the first exchange, he still had a chance to win. When Kang Shinmu hid in the independent space and his divine dragon body disappeared, the golden divine sword dragon that the middle-aged man had transformed into finally reacted. Interesting. It really doesn't seem to be a counterattack ability. The middle-aged man narrowed his eyes. He wasn't too surprised that Kang Shinmu was able to withstand it. If he could defeat Kang Shinmu in such a way, Kang Shinmu wouldn't have been able to make it this far. Obviously, the middle-aged man still held back in order to prevent himself from being tricked by Jiang Shenwu's counterattack talent. If Kang Shinmu really did have a counterattack ability, then if he unleashed his full strength, he might really be counterattacked and killed. He wouldn't make such a mistake. Although this middle-aged man had a lot of battle experience, it also brought him the habit of being overly suspicious. If the power he had unleashed just now was twice as strong, Jiang Shenwu might not have been able to withstand it, and his entire divine dragon body would have dissipated. What a pity. Although the middle-aged man's cautiousness was a good choice for him, it also gave Kang Shinmu a chance. A chance to turn things around. Obviously, this level of attack was not something that Kang Shinmu could withstand head-on. However, at that moment, Kang Shinmu was rapidly devouring his opponent's power. Moreover, he was transforming the devoured power into his own devouring power, forming a vortex of power in the devouring space. This was the strength of his opponent's power. This wasn't Kang Shinmu's own power, but it was a power that Kang Shinmu could use. He couldn't condense such a powerful power himself, so he could only condense it by devouring the power of other people's dragon martial skills. This was also his ultimate trump card to defeat the strong. In an independent space of nothingness, Kang Shinmu's divine dragon body was curled up into a ball, the devouring power around him constantly dense. Immediately after, he felt a powerful force blasting into the independent space where he was hiding. If one didn't have a deep understanding of the spatial attribute void force, they really wouldn't be able to find the independent space he had created. However, the middle-aged man was clearly not one of them. The middle-aged man's strength was rather terrifying, and his understanding of the spatial attribute void force also surpassed that of ordinary dragon martial artists. At that moment, he directly found Kang Shinmu's independent space. Of course, the other party didn't act rashly and directly barged into the independent space. Instead, he began to attack the independent space. Countless golden divine swords condensed into a sword chi storm, whistling towards Kang Shinmu from the entrance of the independent space. The independent space was originally pitch black, but now it was illuminated with golden light. Kang Shinmu's black dragon body kept curling up under the devouring power. At that moment, the devouring power suddenly swept outwards, enveloping the sword chi storm formed by the golden divine swords. The other party didn't know what was going on in the independent space, and he definitely wouldn't dare to enter it, lest he was ambushed by Kang Shinmu. Therefore, this was Kang Shinmu's greatest advantage. The other party couldn't accurately lock onto Kang Shinmu to attack, so he could only let the golden sword chi storm strangle the entire independent space. As for Kang Shinmu, he could roam around and start devouring. His black dragon body had recovered to its peak, and his defense was once again at its limit. At that moment, the other party's scattered sword chi storm couldn't kill Kang Shinmu. However, Kang Shinmu could continuously devour the other party's power during this process. A part of it was stored in the devouring space and turned into a power vortex. The other part was used to heal his own injuries. Right now, Kang Shinmu's healing power came from devouring the other party's power, so the speed at which his power vortex condensed was slightly slower, but it didn't matter. The middle-aged man didn't dare to come in, and this was Kang Shinmu's greatest advantage. He could devour enough power one after another, and then go out to finish the battle. The outcome of this battle was basically decided. He didn't beat me because he was too cautious. If he had attacked me with full force from the beginning, would have already lost. Kang Shinmu thought, and this was also the battle strategy he had thought of from the beginning. Chapter 54:12. Kang Shinmu was in his own independent space. The pitch-black devouring power surrounded his divine dragon body and kept devouring the power of the golden divine sword chi. As time passed, the middle-aged man's attacks were rather patient. He wasn't anxious at all. Kang Shinmu's devouring power became stronger and stronger. It had even surpassed the level of the Transcendent God Stage 7 and was heading towards the level of the Transcendent God Stage 8. The other party's random attacks were sweeping across the entire area. It was impossible for them to harm Jiang Shenwu. In this environment, Kang Shinmu kept devouring the other party's power and condensed it. The power he could use was getting stronger and stronger. However, even with the power of the Transcendent God Stage 8, Kang Shinmu felt that it wasn't safe. What if the other party managed to defend it? Then, there wouldn't be another chance for Kang Shinmu to devour power like this. Therefore, he had to kill him in one blow. Kang Shinmu continued to defend against the other party's attacks. However, very quickly, Kang Shinmu realized that the independent space around him was on the verge of collapse. I see. He's attacking the entire independent space. Kang Shinmu understood. He knew the other party's goal. The middle-aged man didn't treat him as a target. He was too cautious. Not only did he not dare to enter the independent space to take the risk, but he also set the entire independent space as his target. This way, the golden divine light sword chi that surged in were all attacking the independent space. As long as the independent space was shattered, Kang Shinmu would have nowhere to run. This was the middle-aged man's goal. Unfortunately, this gave Kang Shinmu a chance. This middle-aged man might have a lot of combat experience, but he would never have expected that Kang Shinmu would have the chance to devour power. The more power Kang Shinmu devoured, the stronger the power Kang Shinmu could unleash. In the end, Kang Shinmu felt that his devouring power had reached a bottleneck. Transcendent God Stage 9. This level was one realm higher than the Dragon Emperor's divine dragon inheritance blood essence. In other words, Kang Shinmu had finally reached his limit after devouring the Transcendent God Stage 9 Dragon Warrior's superpower. In the past, he didn't know that there would be a limit to his devouring power, but now, he had finally touched it. The power he devoured was all transformed from the power of the golden divine light sword chi. Now, it was completely transformed into devouring power, surging violently in his devouring space. If Jiang Shenwu's power was even a little bit stronger, he would lose control of it, so there's a limit to devouring power, or rather, it's not the limit of devouring power, but the limit of my current realm. Since Jiang Shenwu was only at the peak of the Dragon Emperor's Dragon Emperor inheritance blood essence level, his control over the devouring space did not reach a very strong level. Even with the Transcendent God Stage 9 Dragon Warrior's power, Kang Xinmu couldn't control it. No matter what, it was Kang Xinmu's time now. The other party couldn't sense the power in the devouring space. Therefore, he had to find an opportunity to explode. As long as half of the Transcendent God Stage 9 power could hit the other party's divine dragon body, even if the other party was in a completely defensive state, Kang Xinmu could ensure that he could kill the other party. However, the key was to hit. Kang Xinmu couldn't use this power freely, so he was rather clumsy when using it. It was equivalent to throwing a huge rock that exceeded his own strength limit. Even if he could throw it to his limit, he wouldn't be able to accurately control its direction and destination. Therefore, he had to try his best to get close to the other party and explode. Finally, Kang Xinmu's independent space shattered under the attack of the other party's golden divine light sword Qi. Kang Xinmu's pitch-black divine dragon body gradually appeared in the sky above the mountain range. The golden divine sword dragon also arrived in front of Kang Xinmu majestically. Countless golden divine swords swept towards Jiang Shenwu without the slightest hesitation, bursting forth with an even more powerful attack than before. Unfortunately, Kang Xinmu didn't intend to defend anymore. His black divine dragon body shuttled through space at an extremely fast speed. This was what Kang Xinmu had been preparing for when his independent space was about to shatter. Therefore, this time, Kang Xinmu could react and dodge the other party's attack. A moment later, Kang Xinmu's black dragon body disappeared on the spot, and the countless golden divine swords attacks missed. Then, a black dragon suddenly appeared in front of the golden divine sword dragon. It was Kang Xinmu. Kang Xinmu planned to attack at close range. Just as the middle-aged man's golden divine sword dragon was a little surprised, the devouring power that Kang Xinmu had just condensed finally exploded at this moment. A terrifying power exploded from Kang Xinmu's dragon claws. Break! This was the first time Kang Xinmu had reached his limit. Even the power that he had devoured was condensed to the limit. At this moment, he was like a child lifting a huge rock that weighed 500 kilograms. All the power that he had condensed poured out toward the golden divine sword dragon. Something's wrong. When he felt Kang Xinmu's power pouring out, the middle-aged man immediately felt that something was wrong. This power was too strong, wasn't it? Moreover, the nature of this power felt a little familiar. It seemed to have a bit of his own power, but it was dark attribute power. It was hard to see through and its nature could not be seen. This was the power of a transcendent God Stage 9. Although it was a chaotic power that was mixed into a ball, there was no order to speak of, and there was no dragon martial technique to attack it. However, it naturally carried an incomparably tyrannical destructive force. It was a little similar to the destructive nature of his golden divine sword aura. However, the middle-aged man could not feel the aura of his dragon martial technique in this ball of power. Without a doubt, this was the strength of the devouring power. The devouring power was transformed into devouring power, and at the same time, it retained most of the original dragon martial technique's attack elements. As it was a combination of the super strong power of a transcendent God Stage 9, it exploded at this moment, and the middle-aged man did not even have time to put up his defense. A direct hit. Of course, the middle-aged man's super divine dragon weapon exploded in time, turning into thousands of golden sword aura umbrellas in front of him. Unfortunately, the defense of this super divine dragon weapon alone could not stop Kang Xinmu's explosion at this moment. After a loud bang, the pitch-black light of the devouring power engulfed everything. The body of the golden divine sword dragon dissipated completely in the next moment, as if it was swept away by a tsunami. Chapter 54:13. Kang Xinmu reappeared in the hall. He was still the last one to appear. The other three looked at him as if he was a monster. Him again? This young man at the peak of the Dragon Emperor level could actually make it all the way until now. Apart from him, there was also a golden-haired girl from the Hidden Death Sanctuary, Hakwin. The other two were a middle-aged woman and a gray-robed old man. These four were the strongest among the grade 6 disciples of the Dragon God's great world. Without a doubt, the other three were not surprised. Only Kang Xinmu. They did not expect Kang Xinmu, the peak of the Dragon Emperor level, to be able to make it all the way to this stage. The middle-aged man that they had their eyes on previously had disappeared. After discussing with each other, they came to a conclusion. It was this young man at the peak of the Dragon Emperor level who had defeated the middle-aged man. This was too strange, wasn't it? Hakwin covered her mouth and chuckled. Indeed, her junior was right. Kang Xinmu was really something. Moreover, based on the current situation, no one knew what Kang Xinmu's trump card was. How could he defeat an opponent that was so much stronger than him? A peak expert at the 4th level of the Transcendent God stage. An ordinary 4th level Transcendent God stage could not be compared to such an existence. One had to know that the middle-aged man's combat power could even fight against a 6th level Transcendent God stage dragon martial artist. Kang Xinmu, a peak of the Dragon Emperor level, had actually defeated such an existence? This was too unbelievable. Other than Hakwin, the other two were stunned. Even Hakwin was a little surprised when she saw Kang Xinmu appear in front of her. After all, she really did not think that Kang Xinmu would have a way to defeat an opponent that was so much stronger than him. But now, the three of them, including Hakwin, had enough interest in Kang Xinmu and were also wary of him. They were wary of how he could make it this far. There was no doubt that Kang Xinmu had his own powerful trump card, and it was definitely the kind that exceeded everyone's expectations. It was just as the middle-aged man had guessed. However, it was hard to say who would be the next. When Kang Xinmu appeared in the hall, the Dragon Soul Holy Tower didn't give them too much time to rest. Soon, the four of them were enveloped by the white light and disappeared from the hall, outside the Dragon Soul Sacred Tower. Gu Xinyue had already finished her next battle. She had met Bai Yin in the round of 16 and lost. But in the following round, she had relied on the power of the Nightmare Dragon to defeat 3 people in a row and become number 1. In other words, she was ranked 9th among all the 6th-class disciples in the Holy Land. After all, her cultivation base was only at the peak of the Dragon Emperor stage. If not for the Nightmare Dragon's talent and the psychedelic astral crystal's boost to her talent, her combat strength would probably be less than half of what it was at the moment. It could even be said that Gu Xinyue didn't expect to get such a high ranking so smoothly. Among all the 6th-class disciples in the Holy Land, there were definitely more than 10 who had the power of a level 5 transcendent. She was only at the peak of the Dragon Emperor's cultivation. Moreover, she didn't have the ability to challenge higher-level opponents like Kang Xinmu. It could be said that she relied purely on the talent of the Dragon of Nightmares to get this ranking. The opponents who were defeated by her were all bewitched by the power of the Dragon of Nightmares, and their combat power was greatly reduced. This gave Gu Xinyue a chance. At this moment, she was chatting with the 3 women outside. Yu Tianchong was eliminated by Kang Xinmu, but she was very satisfied with her results. Gu Yusheng and Feng Ligay, on the other hand, were defeated in the 3rd round and were placed at the bottom of the top 64. Of course, they were quite satisfied with this result. After all, this was a competition where all the Holy Lands gathered together. The few of them together were enough to raise the ranking of the 5 extreme mysterious Ice Holy Land again. The rewards they would receive and they returned would definitely not disappoint them. After all, they were only at the level 2 transcendent. They were already satisfied with this result. If they had waited until they reached the level 3 Transcendent, their results might have been even better. It was possible for them to be in the top 16 or even the top 10. However, there were no ifs now. It was obvious that the Dragon Soul Holy Tower wouldn't hold such a competition again in a short period of time. At this moment, the four women were discussing whether Kong Shinmu could get first place. To them, Kong Shinmu was a special existence. If it weren't for Kong Shinmu, they would have been considered geniuses. However, they wouldn't have been able to achieve what they had today. It was all because of Kong Shinmu's appearance that their improvement speed increased. They also got to know an even more monstrous genius like Kong Shinmu. This gave them the motivation to catch up, even though it was difficult to do so. There was no need to talk about Gu Xinyue. Kong Shinmu had helped her a lot. As for Yu Tianchong and the other two women, it was also because Kong Shinmu had helped them once, allowing them to obtain crucial cultivation resources. If it weren't for Kong Shinmu, they might not have broken through to the super mystical dragon level so quickly. Now, there wouldn't be a level 2 Transcendent, and it was very likely that there would only be a level 1 Transcendent. In that case, it would be impossible for them to achieve such results in the Dragon Soul Holy Tower. Their combat power was indeed not low, but their realms had to keep up. Otherwise, they would be like Kong Shinmu, struggling in the battle of the 6th class disciples. As they discussed, they wished Kong Shinmu well. As long as Kong Shinmu could win first place, then Kong Shinmu's name would become a legend in the Dragon God's world. Dragon Emperor at his peak, winning first place among the 6th class disciples. How incredible was this? It could even be said that in the entire history of the Dragon Gods, such a thing had almost never happened, unless it was a dragon-souled dragon warrior. However, it was impossible for ordinary dragon-souled dragon warriors to participate in this kind of competition. The dragon martial artists of the Dragon Soul were all high and mighty existences. Basically, they rarely came into contact with ordinary people. The dragon martial artists of the Dragon Soul were at least existences that could reach the upper echelons of the Supreme Divine Dragon. Even the Emperor Shi mystical dragon, who was known by almost every household in the Dragon God's world, could not reach the level of dragon-souled dragon warriors. They were peerless geniuses that only appeared once in 100 years. The current Dragon Soul Holy Tower was controlled by the top Dragon Soul dragon warriors, and they would not appear easily. Once they did, it would be a big deal. For example, this Holy Land competition held by the Dragon Soul Holy Tower could set off a storm in the entire Dragon God's world. Just as the four women were discussing outside. In the Dragon Soul Holy Tower, Kong Shinmu, who was battling in the small world, finally defeated his opponent, the middle-aged woman. Chapter 54:14. The process of defeating the middle-aged woman was almost exactly the same as the middle-aged man who had defeated the dragon with the golden divine sword. The two of them were about the same strength and age. They were both extremely vigilant. This was also the reason why the two of them had been defeated by Kong Shinmu. As long as they could not defeat Kong Shinmu immediately, it was very likely that Kong Shinmu would devour enough power and turn the tables. When Kong Shinmu finally stood in the hall, Hakuin was the only one left in the hall. Hakuin came from the Hidden Death sacred ground and seemed to be Yi Yin's senior sister. She knew a little about Kong Shinmu and had heard a little about him. However, she did not know much. After all, Yi Yin did not tell his senior sister everything. Yi Yin and Hakuin were not just senior and junior brother. They were also competitors. If Hakuin became the first among the Class 6 disciples, it would not be good news for Yi Yin. Therefore, in order to make things difficult for Hakuin, Yi Yin did not tell his senior sister about Kong Shinmu's combat characteristics. At this moment, Hakuin only knew that Kong Shinmu's defense was very strong. That was all. Moreover, she guessed that Kong Shinmu had defeated two 4th-stage Supreme God opponents twice in a row. Moreover, these two opponents were not ordinary fourth-stage Supreme God opponents. Therefore, Kang Shinmu must have some kind of trump card. What was the trump card? Hakuin really did not know. She could not even guess what type of trump card it would be. No matter what, the final battle had arrived. Only Hakuin and Kang Shinmu were left in the hall. This meant that the first among the class 6 disciples would be born between the two of them. I didn't expect you, a peak dragon emperor, to reach this step. In the hall, Hakuin sized up Kang Shinmu carefully and clicked her tongue in wonder. Her blonde hair made her look extremely beautiful. She was like a goddess who had descended to the mortal world, giving off an unparalleled sense of beauty. Unfortunately, Kang Shinmu did not care about her appearance. He shook his head and said, I didn't think that I would be able to reach this step. I can only say that the others are too weak. What if too weak? Hakuin instantly covered her mouth and chuckled while a wisp of a strange expression appeared in her eyes. Obviously, she discerned the meaning behind Kang Shinmu's words. If Hakuin also lost to Kang Shinmu, then Kang Shinmu would be ranked first among the 6th class disciples. Kang Shinmu, on the other hand, was only at the pinnacle of the Dragon Emperor, who had yet to reach the level of Super Shinran. He was still a 5th-grade disciple. If a 5th-grade disciple won first place, didn't that mean that all the 6th-grade disciples in the holy lands of the Dragon God's world were trash? Once Kang Shinmu won first place, then no matter which 6th-grade disciple went out, they would be looked down upon by others. Not to mention the 7th-grade disciples and the dragon martial artists who were stronger than them. Even the dragon martial artists who were weaker than them would probably look down on them and ridicule them in private. Therefore, Hakuin would absolutely not allow such a thing to happen. Although she looked very relaxed on the surface, in fact, she had already put a lot of effort into guessing and guarding against Kang Shinmu's means. Then, 2 beams of white light enveloped the two of them. In the sight of the two of them, the other party quickly disappeared in the white light. Kang Shinmu opened his eyes and found himself at the top of a snow-capped mountain. At the top of this snow-capped mountain, the surroundings were full of whistling cold winds, and there was even hail falling from the sky. These hail contained infinite ice attribute power. If it were a dragon martial artist who had just started cultivating here, he would probably be smashed to death by the hail. This was quite a harsh environment. Moreover, Kang Shinmu found that this place had a certain advantage for him. Because, the surrounding spiritual energy of heaven and earth flowed much slower than the outside world. In this place, it would take a longer time to perform any dragon martial technique. The time needed to condense power was longer, and the time needed to perform the dragon martial technique was also longer. In other words, it was almost impossible for the other party to kill Kang Shinmu in one go. This was an extremely harsh fighting environment, which Kang Shinmu had never encountered before. Perhaps it only appeared in the decisive battle between the 6th-grade disciples. This was also to see more of the combat power of the two sides in the decisive battle. In such an environment, if the two sides wanted to win, they needed to pay more attention to the details. Moreover, the most important thing was that this kind of environment was not uncommon in the outside world. Especially in some ruins, many of the battle environments were like this, and there was also a kind of test for the two sides. After Kang Shinmu appeared, he directly transformed into a pitch-black divine dragon and soared in the sky. The devouring power had already begun to devour the surrounding power. For Kang Shinmu, this ice attribute power was a source of continuous recovery. Now that Kang Shinmu had begun to devour, he could store this power, but he could not use it to kill the enemy. After all, it was only the power of a heavenly phenomenon, and it did not have that kind of offensive nature. Only the power of the dragon martial technique that was devoured could be used to kill the enemy. Immediately after, Kang Shinmu saw a white divine dragon appear in the void in front of him. This white divine dragon actually had golden dragon scales on its body. This was Hakuin's complete form. Generally, the original inheritance of the divine dragon power of the hidden death sacred land was the lone hidden killer dragon, such as Yi. In fact, Hakuin also inherited the lone hidden killer dragon, but there was a deeper level of powerful power hidden in her body, and this power was the source of her golden hair, the divine light dragon's inheritance blood essence. In other words, Hakuin actually inherited the inheritance blood essence of two kinds of divine dragons. This situation was extremely rare in the entire dragon god's great world. And the benefit that this brought to Hakuin was that she could use the inheritance blood essence of two kinds of divine dragons freely, and she could even combine the power of the inheritance blood essence of both to produce some new changes. The divine light dragon, the lone hidden killer dragon. When the two were combined, Hakuin herself named the divine light dragon. This was the divine dragon's inheritance power that only she had in the entire dragon god's great world. From this point of view, it was similar to Kong Shinmu. Anyway, Kong Shinmu's devouring power of inheritance, he also felt that there would not be a second person in the entire dragon god's great world who had it. And the divine light dragon's dragon scales were golden, and it could perfectly hide in the void. The combination of the two kinds of divine dragon's inheritance power made her assassination ability far better than the ordinary lone hidden killer dragon, and she had a natural restraint on the power of the dark attribute. Therefore, she was so confident that she could defeat Kong Shinmu. After all, Kong Shinmu's power was black, which was the power of the dark attribute, and she just happened to restrain it. The final battle has begun. The divine light dragon that Hakuin had transformed into turned into a white and golden shadow, instantly disappearing into the void. The next moment, a golden holy light suddenly exploded in front of Kong Shinmu. It was extremely fast. Even in this environment where the condensing power was suppressed, Hakuin launched an attack in an instant. Previously, Hakuin did not even use her true strength. Chapter 54:15. Kong Shinmu was taken aback by the other party. In this environment, the speed at which Kong Shinmu used any dragon martial technique was twice as slow as usual. However, Hakuin did not seem to be affected at all, or rather, her speed had already surpassed that of ordinary dragon martial artists, reaching an extreme speed. This was an ability that even Kong Shinmu did not have. It should be known that the speed at which every dragon martial artist gathered power was about the same. If one was more compatible with a certain type of power, then the speed of gathering would be faster. In addition, the increase in the grade of the divine dragon's blood essence would also speed up the speed of gathering power. However, the speed at which every super divine dragon gathered power was about the same. At most, it would increase according to the grade, but it would not reach the level of Hakuin. The speed at which Hakuin used her techniques was too terrifying, and it had exceeded all of Kong Shinmu's previous knowledge. Perhaps, only supreme experts can be on par with her in terms of condensing power. Kong Shinmu guessed in his heart. This was the most frightening aspect of Bai Yin's journey. Basically, her attack speed was twice as fast as anyone else's. After she attacked, her opponent did not even have time to use his defensive dragon martial technique, and she had already defeated her opponent. How could others fight against her? It was only when she was up against Gu Xinyue that Gu Xinyue's Nightmare Mirage Dragon ability gave her some trouble. It made her feel that Gu Xinyue had the ability to make it to the top 8. At this moment, Hakuin directly launched a surprise attack on Kong Shinmu. Even after suppressing the speed of the dragon martial technique, Hakuin appeared in front of Kong Shinmu in an instant. The white and gold divine dragon bodies appeared directly in front of Kong Shinmu. In the next moment, an endless torrent of white and gold power burst forth from Kong Shinmu like a volcanic eruption, drowning Kong Shinmu's entire black dragon body. If Kong Shinmu wasn't prepared, he would have been dead by now. However, it just so happened that when he first entered this dual pocket world, he was already prepared to face a strong attack, so, in the face of Hakuin's surprise attack, Kong Shinmu immediately disappeared into the independent space. Once again, he created an independent space. This time, he hid in an independent space and engulfed the surroundings with his devouring power. He started to devour the platinum-colored torrent of energy. Unfortunately, Hakuin was not the middle-aged man and woman he had faced before. Because of their cautiousness, the middle-aged man and woman did not dare to enter Kang Shinmu's independent space. They only dared to bombard it from the outside. But Hakuin was different. Hakuin's platinum divine dragon form charged in right after. It could be seen that her understanding of the space-type void force was quite high. She could easily break into Kang Shinmu's independent space. After she barged in, she did not hesitate and continued to attack Kang Shinmu. It could be said that she was closing in on him step by step. Jiang Shunwu was also helpless. This Bai Yin was not giving him the slightest chance, Fortunately, he had just devoured a part of his opponent's power, so his resistance to Hakuin's attacks had increased a little. Immediately after, Hakuin's attack came from all directions, almost enveloping Kang Shinmu's entire black dragon body. The power of the divine dragon's inheritance, which was a mixture of white and gold, burst forth with a violent attack. Dragon Technique, Divine Stealth Kill Sword Formation. The high-level Super Divine Dragon technique that Hakuin cultivated had already reached the level of the Ultimate Sage realm. Its lethality was almost at the level of the Ultimate God level 8. This was simply unimaginable. After all, Hakuin's cultivation was only at the Ultimate God level 3. The power of her dragon technique had actually crossed 5 levels. This was the top genius of the entire Dragon God's world. After all, among all the grade 6 disciples in the Holy Land, there was only one Hakuin. Therefore, it was completely normal for her to have this kind of strength. Her attack came too quickly. If Kang Shinmu was not prepared in advance, it would be impossible for him to dodge. Moreover, he was already in his own independent space. There was no other way for him to dodge. His understanding of the spatial attribute void power was similar to Hakuin's. When Hakuin launched her attack, Kang Shinmu had no way out. He could only fight it head-on. The pitch-black god power had already covered Kang Shinmu's black dragon body. The curtain of despair condensed under the support of the dragon soldier Chen Xing's defensive battle runes, enveloping Kang Shinmu's entire divine dragon body. Suddenly, the power of the divine stealth kill sword formation descended. Kang Shinmu's curtain of despair shattered in an instant. After all, the limit of this curtain of despair was that it could only withstand the attack of a ultimate god level 6. In the face of Hakuin's divine stealth kill sword formation, it was completely powerless. Then, the god power of the divine good dragon technique was almost immediately shattered. The defense of the divine good dragon technique was similar to the curtain of despair. Therefore, even when the two layers were stacked together, it could not withstand the divine stealth kill sword formation. In fact, it could only offset less than 10% of the opponent's attack power. Brilliant Gem. Kang Shinmu had no choice but to activate the Brilliant Gem's defense. The Brilliant Gem was simply too useful in the last 3 battles. Otherwise, Kang Shinmu would have been defeated when he was dealing with the middle-aged man. If it was someone else, they might not be able to activate the Brilliant Gem in the next battle. After all, the Brilliant Gem needed 7 days to recharge. It was the same even in this battle. Otherwise, the Brilliant Gem would be too invincible. However, to Kang Shinmu, as long as he devoured enough power, he would naturally be able to replenish the Brilliant Gem's power. The devoured power could be transformed freely. This was the strongest point of Kang Shinmu. At that moment, the Brilliant Gem's power condensed into a golden glow that blocked Kang Shinmu's divine dragon body. The golden barrier blocked the divine stealth kill sword formation. Hakuin was shocked. She did not expect Kang Shinmu to still be able to activate the Brilliant Gem. Could it be that he did not activate the brilliant gem when he was dealing with the middle-aged man and woman? This was too unbelievable. Kang Shinmu was only at the peak of the Dragon Emperor. How did he defeat the two fourth-stage transcendent gods without relying on the brilliant gem? From Hakuin's point of view, Kang Shinmu's current performance could be said to be useless. Other than his understanding of the space attribute void power, there was nothing extraordinary about him. He could only rely on the brilliant gem for his defense. His performance was too poor. How did he defeat the fourth-stage transcendent gods? However, she did not know that in her eyes, Kang Shinmu's defense was far superior to that of ordinary people. It was even at the fifth or sixth stage of the transcendent gods. However, her attacks were too strong. As a result, any defense was nothing in her eyes. Hence, it was no different from other people with poor defense. The golden barrier condensed by Kang Shinmu's brilliant gem finally managed to block her attack. Chapter 54:16. After all, the effect of the brilliant ruby stone could only last for a short period of time. When the effect of the brilliant ruby stone wore off, Kang Shinmu was faced with Hakuin's super-powerful dragon technique, the holy stealth sword formation. Countless platinum-colored sword cheese swept towards him from all directions. According to Hakuin's thoughts, if Kang Shinmu did not use any trump card, he would have been defeated by her. After all, the brilliant ruby stone had been activated. What other defensive methods did Kang Shinmu have? However, she did not expect that Kang Shinmu had just used the brilliant ruby stone to buy some time. He had successfully devoured a part of her power. This part of power was absorbed by Kang Shinmu to increase his own resistance. At the same time, he activated the part of power that he had devoured. It was going against the opponent's holy stealth sword formation. When he was dealing with the middle-aged man and woman previously, Kang Shinmu had been holding on to this part of power and had not used it. However, at this very moment, when he was fighting against Hakuin, he had no choice but to use this part of power in advance. If he did not use this part of power, he would be defeated immediately. Hakuin was really too powerful, and he could only resist her attack by relying on her power. This was the first time that Kang Shinmu had directly devoured his opponent's power to fight against her. Instantly, the platinum-colored holy stealth sword formation's power collided with Kang Shinmu's pitch-black power. Kang Shinmu devoured his opponent's power and turned it into the pitch-black sword formation's power. From the outside, the only difference was the color. This gave Hakuin a strange feeling. Why did this dragon technique feel similar to her holy stealth sword formation? It was just that the attribute of the power that was activated was not the same. However, this holy stealth sword formation was definitely Hakuin's ultimate killer move. It could only be performed by combining the characteristics of the divine light dragons and the lone hidden killer dragon's inherited blood essence. She did not believe that Kang Shinmu could actually use a dragon martial skill that was similar to this sword formation. Most importantly, wasn't the dragon martial skill Kang Shinmu displayed way too powerful? It was almost half as strong as her. Moreover, it was completely in a fighting stance, as if it wasn't the slightest bit worried about exhausting its strength. Logically speaking, a dragon warrior at the peak of the Dragon Emperor shouldn't have much energy stored in him. I'm afraid he won't be able to withstand this kind of intense consumption after 3 times. Hakuin calculated in her mind. Therefore, she did not pay too much attention to it. After all, her strength was enough to crush Kang Shinmu. Furthermore, even if Kang Shinmu were to display such a dragon martial skill, it would only have half of her power. That was far from enough to defeat her. Following that, Hakuin did not hesitate and launched a series of fierce attacks at Kang Shinmu. As for Kang Shinmu, he was still fighting at the same pace. Kang Shinmu would directly devour half of the opponent's attack and then store a small portion of it while the rest was used to block the opponent's attack. In this way, basically he would only receive a small portion of the damage. Moreover, he could store a portion of the energy every time and use it to turn the tables later on. This kind of method sounded inconceivable. Devouring half of the opponent's energy to counter the opponent. If he could perfectly do this, then Kang Xinmu would simply be invincible. Unfortunately, even Kang Xinmu was unable to do this perfectly now. He would often make some mistakes. The main thing was that the opponent's energy came too fast, too ferocious. For Kang Xinmu's devouring power to devour, it would require time. And even with the strength of his devouring power now, to want to devour half of the opponent's dragon martial skill in an instant, that was absolutely impossible. Therefore, Kang Xinmu had to stall for time. When the opponent used the dragon martial skill, he had to seize the opportunity and dodge in a certain direction. Even if he could only dodge for a short distance, it was still a great opportunity for him to devour the opponent's energy. Sometimes, before he could dodge in time and devour enough energy, the opponent's dragon martial skill had already descended on Kang Xinmu's body. This caused Kang Xinmu's black dragon body to be quickly riddled with wounds. Many of the wounds were so deep that the bones could be seen. Even the dragon scales were riddled with holes and more than half of them were destroyed. It looked like Kang Xinmu was very miserable. However, unfortunately, Kang Xinmu did not die. He just did not receive any fatal attacks. This was because he had a good control of the situation. Every time he felt that he could not bear it anymore, he would consume more of the energy he devoured to resist the opponent's attack. He felt that if he delayed a little more time, he could devour more energy and consume less of the energy he devoured. In this way, Kang Xinmu was simply an undying god of war. No matter how powerful Hakuin's attack was, no matter how fast it was, she could not kill Kang Xinmu. At most, she could heavily injure Kang Xinmu. However, after Kang Xinmu suffered heavy injuries, he would recover very quickly. The recovery speed of his dark dragon filth control and his devouring power was unimaginable. Even Hakuin could see with her naked eyes that Kang Xinmu's injuries were recovering rapidly, almost without stopping. She could not help but feel puzzled. Kang Xinmu was only at the pinnacle of the Dragon Emperor. Where did his power come from? Why did he not seem to be exhausted after fighting for so long? Without a doubt, this completely changed Hakuin's understanding of the Dragon Emperor's level. According to her understanding, the Dragon Emperor's power was extremely limited. When she was still the Dragon Emperor, each battle would not last for too long. Only when one reached the level of the super mystical dragon could one mobilize the surrounding spiritual energy of heaven and earth and transform it into the power of the mystical dragon's blood essence. But now, Kang Xinmu's performance was already similar to that of a super mystical dragon martial artist. In fact, he was even better. Whether it was his defensive abilities, the strange ability to execute dragon-like techniques, or that terrifying recovery speed, they all made Hakuin feel that it was a little tricky. This Kang Xinmu's fighting style was too disgusting, wasn't it? It did not seem like he had any special trump card, but she just could not kill him. If she could not kill him, he would exhaust her energy and look for opportunities. Hakuin did not even know what to do. Now that the intensity of her attack had reached its peak, she had fully used the super mystical dragon weapon and unleashed her super mystical dragon martial technique to the extreme. Why don't I try another type of dragon martial technique? Hakuin thought to herself and quickly made a decision. Because at this pace, she realized that she really could not deal with Kang Xinmu. At least, she lacked the power to make the final decision. Could it be that Kang Xinmu was already familiar with her dragon martial technique? So he could replicate a dragon martial technique similar to hers, and even the strength was similar. Although Hakuin felt that it was a little unbelievable, the current situation was very similar. Chapter 54:17. Since that was the case, Hakuin also wanted to try other dragon martial skills. Although the divine stealth sword formation was her strongest dragon martial skill, it did not mean that it was the most suitable. Perhaps other dragon martial skills would be able to restrain Kang Shinmu to a certain extent? With the mentality of giving it a try, Bai Yin began to display other dragon attack martial techniques. These dragon martial skills were all high-level super divine dragon martial skills. They were all dragon martial skills that she had cultivated before. Although they had not reached the level of the Supreme Saint Realm, they had at least reached the Heaven Realm, or even the Saint Realm. Every move that she displayed was enough to kill an ordinary dragon martial artist of the same realm. However, when facing Kang Shinmu, she found that it was still useless. What was even more exaggerated was that when she used other dragon martial skills, the power of the pitch-black dragon martial skill that Jiang Shenwu used to counterattack would also become similar to her own power, this is, the duplication ability. But, even if he can duplicate the form of the dragon martial skill, how can he make the dragon martial skill that he displayed become so strong? Where did the power come from? Poor Hakuin still did not realize that every time she attacked Kang Shinmu, the power of the super divine dragon martial skill was only about half of what it was when she used it. In the end, she could not deal a fatal blow to Kang Shinmu. As Hakuin displayed more dragon martial skills, she became more and more shocked. This Kang Shinmu was too terrifying. No wonder he could come all the way until now. However, Hakuin still did not know how Kang Shinmu could fight until now. This situation was very strange. It was said to be the duplication ability, but it did not seem like it. Even if it was the duplication ability, it was extremely rare in the great world of the dragon gods, and it was not easy to see. This Kang Shinmu's duplication ability was even stronger than the usual. What kind of power was this? It was hard to imagine. Facing Kang Shinmu, Hakuin felt a sense of helplessness. However, when she thought of the consequences of losing to Kang Shinmu, her competitive spirit was aroused. Among more than 100 holy lands in the entire dragon god's great world, he was the strongest among the 6th grade disciples. How could Hakuin be an ordinary person? The more desperate the situation was, the more it could stimulate her fighting spirit and talent. In fact, she had finally broken through. Accompanied by a flash of golden light, the divine stealth killer sword formation that she cultivated allowed her to comprehend a whole new realm. Originally, the divine stealth killer sword formation had reached the pinnacle of the extreme saint realm. Logically speaking, this was already the pinnacle of all the dragon martial skills, and it was impossible to advance any further. This meant that the dragon martial artist had completely comprehended the dragon martial skill and was able to completely unleash its full power. But now, the divine stealth sword formation was split into two by Hakuin. Holy sword formation. Stealth killing sword formation. The two sword formations had actually been separated, each with different elemental powers, and the attack effects were also different. Moreover, the two sword formations complemented each other, and when combined, they could actually produce an even more terrifying fusion effect. It was equivalent to two extreme Saint Realm super dragon martial skills merging together and exploding. One dragon martial skill had become two dragon martial skills. The move was still the same, but the power was several times stronger. The next moment, the white and golden sword chi swept towards Kang Shinmu. Kang Shinmu did not expect that his opponent had hidden such a killer move. Of course, he did not expect that Hakuin had also made a temporary breakthrough, and it was a breakthrough under the pressure of him. Otherwise, she might not have been able to comprehend such a move of the dragon martial skill. At this moment, the divine stealth killer sword formation and the divine stealth killer sword formation exploded at the same time, merging together to produce a big sword. This huge sword was completely translucent and shone with white and golden light. It slashed vertically towards Kang Shinmu through the void. There were no fancy tricks. As such a big sword slashed down, Kang Shinmu had nowhere to hide. This is not good. The power of this dragon martial skill seems to have exceeded what the independent space can withstand. Forget it. Now, Kang Shinmu did not have the time or opportunity to escape this independent space. He could only release all the power that he had just devoured. The power of both sides had reached the level of Transcendent God Stage 9. At this moment, the independent space that Kang Shinmu had created was withstanding the super attacks of both sides. The power of both sides exploded, causing the entire independent space to collapse. Kang Shinmu did his best to release his devouring power, wanting to devour the surrounding destructive power. Unfortunately, it was of no use. In the end, the independent space was annihilated. And the power produced by the annihilation of the space was far from what Kang Shinmu and Hakuin could withstand. Both of them could not escape from the independent space. The final battle. Drawl, the voice of the Dragon Soul Holy Tower reached their ears. When Kang Shinmu and Hakuin opened their eyes, they realized that they had returned to the hall of the Dragon Soul Holy Tower. Everything that happened before was naturally just a battle between the spiritual clones that the Dragon Soul Holy Tower had created for them. That was why Kang Shinmu could not sense the existence of the power of the galaxy inheritance. And because of this, they appeared in the hall unscathed after the battle. The combat power of both of you is beyond our imagination. Even among the Class 7 disciples, only a few people can compete with you. So, I announce that Hakuin of the Hidden Death Holy Ground and Kang Shinmu of the 5 Extremes Mysterious Ice Holy Ground have jointly won the first place of the Class 6 Disciple competition. First place also meant first place. Kang Shinmu and Hakuin did not expect that they would be tied for first place. To Kang Shinmu, this result was undoubtedly acceptable. After all, Hakuin was just too strong. The only reason he was able to persevere to the end and perish together with Bai Yin was because his opponent did not know him well enough. It seemed that Yi Yin did not tell Hakuin many things. But for Bai Yin, this outcome was a little hard to accept. It was too humiliating. He actually tied with a Dragon Emperor at the peak level? Wouldn't this be a joke if word got out? Although Kang Shinmu was not an ordinary peak Dragon Emperor and there were too many Class 6 disciples who lost to Kang Shinmu, but Hakuin was especially strict with herself. No matter what, Hakuin was a little depressed now. But it seemed that the reward for the two of them tying for first place would be split into two. The massive cultivation resources that the first place would get would be shared with the other person who was tied for first place. Of course, the reward that the second place would get would also be shared equally with them, in other words, their gains would be shared equally. Chapter 54:18. On the other hand, Hakuin was not very satisfied. However, she really could not say anything now. After all, Kang Shinmu had fought her to a draw with his strength. This made her a little sad. Unexpectedly, in the end, she could not defeat this seemingly weak boy. To be able to go all the way to this level, this boy really had some skills. Most importantly, Kang Shinmu was now only at the peak of the Dragon Emperor, but he already had such terrifying strength. This also meant that when Kang Shinmu stepped into the transcendent level and became a Super Shinran, to what extent would his strength grow? It was hard to predict. However, Hakuin also gained something this time. Under the pressure of facing Kang Shinmu, she also broke through her limits and cultivated her strongest dragon martial technique to a higher realm. Not everyone had the opportunity to learn a high-level Super Shinran martial technique that could be divided into two. It all depended on one's own comprehension. And in the entire Dragon God world, it was extremely rare to be able to comprehend such a dragon martial technique. Senior Sister Hakuin, the competition is over. See you later. Kang Shinmu found that he had already received his reward. After a brief inspection, he found that there was no problem, so he smiled at Hakuin and turned to leave. You, wait. Hakuin suddenly stopped Kong Shinmu. "Senior sister, what's the matter?" Kong Shinmu turned sideways and asked. "Forget it. Nothing." Bai Yin immediately shook his head. His adorable face, which was covered by his golden hair, looked a little depressed. She originally wanted to ask Kong Shinmu what kind of skills he had. After all, she had never heard of a fighting style similar to Kong Shinmu's, and she was very interested in everything about cultivation. Curiosity made her want to know more about Kong Shinmu. However, she knew that Kong Shinmu wouldn't tell her his secret just like that, so she stopped and didn't ask the question she wanted to ask. All in all, a genius like Kong Shinmu might appear again in the future, so she wasn't in a hurry. At that time, maybe she and Kong Shinmu would be teammates. After all, in the environment of the Dragon God's great world, there was very little competition between them. After all, they were not disciples of the dragon warriors from the same holy land. On the contrary, if they left the great world of the dragon gods and traveled outside, there would be more opportunities for cooperation. At that time, it would be easier for him to understand Kong Shinmu. Both sides parted. As for Kong Shinmu, he had only taken a few steps when he felt his body being enveloped by a white light. This is the Dragon Soul Holy Tower's summon. When Kong Shinmu realized this, he was still a little nervous. After all, the origin of the devouring power was unknown. If the Dragon Soul Holy Tower really found something wrong with the power of the divine dragon's inherited blood essence, it would bring him great trouble. Fortunately, Kong Shinmu soon discovered that the summon of the Dragon Soul Holy Tower was not malicious toward him. The next day, Kong Shinmu met a Dragon Soul warrior from the Dragon Soul Holy Tower in the Dragon Soul Holy Tower. To be precise, he didn't really see him. After all, he only saw the clone of the Dragon Soul warrior and asked a little about his divine dragon's inherited blood essence. Kong Shinmu explained that it was the power of the devouring attribute. It could devour power and transform it into its own power and defensive ability. If that was the case, it was still understandable. The other party didn't seem to think much about it. And before leaving, he gave Kong Shinmu a message. When Kong Shinmu reached the supreme level, he could come to the Dragon Soul Holy Tower to participate in a test. If he passed that test, he would be qualified to become a Dragon Soul warrior. This was undoubtedly a great shock to Kong Shinmu. When he first came to the Dragon Soul Holy Tower and heard about it, he knew that it was the strongest place in the Dragon God clan. The Dragon Soul warrior was the true leader of the entire Dragon God clan. And now, as long as Kong Shinmu reached the supreme level, he would have the opportunity to become a Dragon Soul warrior. There was no doubt that this was a great motivation for Kong Shinmu. However, he wouldn't be in a hurry. After all, his ultimate goal was the ancestral dragon, which was the ultimate goal for the Dragon Soul warrior. It could be said that if Kong Shinmu wanted to become the ancestral dragon, the Dragon Soul warrior was basically a stepping stone on the road. Although he didn't have to become a Dragon Soul warrior to become the ancestral dragon, it could be said that it was much easier to become a Dragon Soul warrior than an ancestral dragon. Since the goal was the most difficult, achieving the relatively simple goal of becoming a Dragon Soul warrior was not a big deal for Kong Shinmu. Of course, for the current Kong Shinmu, the Dragon Soul warrior was still quite attractive. This meant that he could save a lot of time to cultivate. After becoming a Dragon Soul warrior and cultivating in the Dragon Soul Holy Tower, he could get cultivation resources that the 5 extremes Dark Ice Holy Lands and the like couldn't provide. This was the place with the most abundant cultivation resources in the entire Dragon God clan world. In the end, Kong Shinmu left the Dragon Soul Holy Tower with a large number of cultivation resources as a reward. The cultivation resources that the Dragon Soul Holy Tower gave to Kong Shinmu alone were worth 20 million gold dragon coins. However, to Kong Shinmu, this amount of gold dragon coins was nothing. He needed at least 30 million gold dragon coins to unlock the third layer of the starry small world. He was still short of 10 million gold dragon coins. If these cultivation resources were given to other cultivators, they would undoubtedly be able to purchase the best dragon weapons and dragon techniques. They would also be able to obtain a lot of cultivation resources to increase their cultivation level. Even a super mystical dragon would be able to increase his cultivation level by at least one realm. However, Kang Xinmu wasn't in a hurry to increase his cultivation level. Before coming to the Dragon Soul Holy Tower, I had already unlocked the second layer of the starry small world. By mobilizing the full power of the starry small world, I can unleash an attack that is equivalent to a fifth-stage transcendent god. It's a pity that I can't use the starry small world during the competition in the Dragon Soul Holy Tower. However, after such a long period of competition, I have improved greatly. Just the super mystical dragon technique, the extreme destructive heavenly might Dragon Soul, is already at the fifth stage transcendent god. Therefore, in comparison, the strength of my starry sky power inheritance isn't comparable to the strength of a Dragon Soul warrior. Kang Xinmu was a little emotional. Previously, when he was training, the starry sky power was his strongest technique. Chapter 54:19 5 Extremes Mysterious Ice Holy Land. For Kang Xinmu, he had participated in 2 consecutive trials in the Dragon Soul Sacred Tower. He had already experienced 2 months in the Dragon Soul Sacred Tower. However, for the entire Dragon God's great world, only a total of 7 days had passed. From the day Kang Xinmu participated in the trial as a 5th-class disciple until now, only a total of 7 days had passed. And in these 7 days, too many things had happened. Kang Xinmu first obtained first place among the 5th-class disciples and then the 6th-class disciples. During this period, he had defeated too many powerful opponents. When the news spread, countless people did not dare to believe it. And this also caused the 5 Extremes Mysterious Ice Holy Lands points to directly reach first place in this trial. And it surpassed the second-place Hidden Death Holy Land by nearly half of its points. This was simply a terrifying number of points. As for the Hidden Death Holy Land, overall, it was also not bad. The main thing was that the 6th-class disciples' points were too important at this stage. Up until now, the influence of the 3rd-class disciples' points was not very important. The ranking of points was mainly based on the overall rankings of the 4th-class disciples, 5th-class disciples, and 6th-class disciples. Generally speaking, the 6th-class disciples' points were more important. Therefore, the 5 Extremes Mysterious Ice Holy Land and Hidden Death Holy Land became first and second place because they had Kang Xinmu and Hakuin respectively. When Kang Xinmu returned, the entire 5 Extremes Mysterious Ice Holy Land was filled with cheers. There were even several elders who came out to personally welcome Kang Xinmu. This kid really brought glory to our 5 Extremes Mysterious Ice Holy Land. I knew that my decision was right to let him participate in the 5th-class disciple battle. Now it seems that it was right, right? Not only was it right, it was simply right. First place among the 5th-class disciples and tied for first place among the 6th-class disciples. Even if it's just a tie for first place, it's still a great honor. What a pity. If only it wasn't a tie for first place. That Hidden Death Holy Land's Hakuin is also an amazing girl. That girl is amazing. At least, she's much more amazing than when I was young. In the future, it will still be the world of these young people. Our Kang Xinmu is also amazing to be able to do such an incredible thing. The Peak Transcendent Realm Elders personally welcomed him, and the 5 Extremes Mysterious Ice Holy Land was filled with cheers. After Jiang Xinwu returned, he discovered that many disciples of the entire 5 Extreme Dark Ice Holy Land had gathered here. Almost all of them welcomed him back. Although he wasn't used to such an atmosphere, there was no doubt that he had become a celebrity in the 5 extreme Dark Ice Holy Land and even the entire Dragon God Great Cosmos. Even the Holy Land's people would recognize him now. Of course, Jiang Shenwu did not feel anything about it. In his opinion, strength was still the most important thing. Without strength, no matter how great one's reputation was, it would be useless. With enough power, even if everyone in the world didn't know him, so what? In order to reward Jiang Shenwu for his great contributions to the 5 extreme profound Ice Holy Land, the elders of the 5 extreme profound Ice Holy Land had already strongly recommended that Jiang Shenwu be rewarded. This reward was supposed to be a heaven and earth saint grade treasure with 5 layers of inscriptions. However, it was said that Emperor Shi's divine dragon had gone against the majority's wishes and suggested giving some cultivation resources directly to Kang Xinmu. The total value of the resources was about the same as a 5-layered engraved heavenly saint grade item, about 10 million gold dragon coins. A heaven and earth saint grade with 5 engravings was the weakest heaven and earth saint grade, and in reality, it was quite cheap. In order to unleash its full power, it would require at least 100 million gold dragon coins worth of cultivation resources to unlock all of its seals. Even if all of its seals were unlocked, it would only be equivalent to an elementary divine dragon. To the wealthy dragon martial artists, it was useless. But for the poor dragon martial artists, they could not afford it even if they wanted to. Emperor Shi's mystical dragon knew that Kang Xinmu had a super saint item of heaven and earth, and that saint item was even a small world. Therefore, she didn't think that Kang Xinmu would need to use this saint item of heaven and earth with 5 layers of inscriptions. Therefore, it was better to directly exchange it for the same amount of cultivation resources. In this way, Kang Xinmu's own saint item of heaven and earth could unlock the next layer of seal faster. In the end, Kang Xinmu obtained cultivation resources worth 10 million gold dragon coins from the 5 extremes mysterious Ice Holy Land. Coupled with the rewards he obtained from the Dragon Soul Holy Tower, he just happened to be able to unlock the 3rd layer of the Starry Sky Small World. The 3rd layer of seal was unlocked. After Kang Xinmu obtained the resources, he did not hesitate and immediately started unlocking the 3rd layer of the Starry Sky Small World at the Gu family residence in the 5 extremes mysterious Ice City. Previously, he unlocked 2 layers of seal of the Starry Sky Small World, causing the sky of the small world to have 2 more layers. And now, the 4th layer of sky gradually appeared in the Starry Sky Small World. The entire Starry Sky Small World was becoming more and more like a complete world, and its overall size had further doubled. It could accommodate more people living inside. Of course, Kang Xinmu did not let other living people enter for the time being. Now, in the entire Starry Sky Small World, there were only a few cultivators who had inherited the power of the Starry Sky. Recently, their development in the Starry Sky Small World had been very good. The former General Yin Fengling from the Talisman Aqua tribe had finally returned to the Transcendent level and possessed the 1st stage of the Transcendent God level of the Starry Sky power. Chen Chong and Wei Xiaoning also possessed the 3rd stage of the Transcendent God level of the Starry Sky power. Now, the battle power of the Starry Sky power inheritance could basically defeat opponents who were 1 level higher. In other words, Chen Chong and Wei Xiaoning could fight against ordinary 4th stage Transcendent God level dragon warriors. One had to know that they were originally only at the peak of the Dragon Emperor. Now that they had improved so much in such a short time, it was really unexpected. In fact, it was not that the Starry Sky power inheritance was very powerful, but that they had too many cultivation resources to cultivate the Starry Sky power inheritance. There were many cultivation resources in the Starry Sky Small World that no one fought with them for. They used them whenever they wanted. This also led to their improvement speed being very fast. Other than the 3 of them, there were also the 2 women, Gu Xinyue and Chu Yueqiang. In terms of the Starry Sky power inheritance, the 2 women also did not fall behind. They were already close to the 3rd stage of the Transcendent God level. Of course, because the two women had participated in the Dragon Soul Holy Tower competition, they had spent some time inside and had not officially broken through. However, they were not far from breaking through. I haven't seen Su Yi from the Demon God tribe and Yuhan from the Bone Imperial tribe recently. I have been in the Dragon God tribe's great world, it is not easy for them to see me. Kang Xinmu smiled helplessly. Chapter 54:20. As the fourth layer of the Starry Sky Small World was unlocked, the space of the small world expanded again. It even felt like the sky and the sea. The space was extremely vast, and it was even divided into two layers, the ground and the back. The sky was divided into 4 layers. If Kang Xinmu did not use his control of the Starry Sky Small World, it would probably take him a month to fly from one end to the other. Moreover, the space in the Starry Sky Small World was controlled by Kang Xinmu. Therefore, others could not activate the space attribute void power in the Starry Sky Small World to travel through space. Simply put, the world was extremely vast. However, those who cultivated in the Starry Sky Small World could not be bothered to go to the space that was expanded later, as they were all barren lands. The Starry Sky Inheritance Temple was concentrated in the most central position. They would basically move around in these places and would not go too far. There was nothing too far away, so what was there to go to? However, to Kang Xinmu, the expansion of the Starry Sky Small World was very significant. This was because as the third layer of the Starry Sky Small World was unlocked, Kang Xinmu could feel that the power of the Starry Sky was surging with stronger power. The void that expanded out contained a considerable amount of power. This power was comparable to a transcendent God level 9 existence when it exploded in one go. Of course, it was only at the level of an ordinary transcendent God level 9 existence. There were also many dragon martial artists at the peak of the transcendent God realm. Their strength had already surpassed the 9th stage of the transcendent God realm, and they could even compete with supreme divine dragons. For example, Jiang Shenwu could not be treated as an ordinary peak dragon emperor. However, even if the power of the Starry Sky Small World was comparable to an ordinary transcendent God level 9, it would still be very shocking. One must know that compared to Jiang Shenwu, this was a power that surpassed his own realm by a great realm. If it was used in the permanent intermediate relic, almost no one would be able to resist it. Of course, it could not be ruled out that the opponent would use a defensive method like the brilliant ruby stone. Once this method was used, even if the power of the Starry Sky Small World was used, it would not be able to break through. Therefore, although the power was strong, to use it and produce sufficient effects, a certain strategy was needed. One could not use it casually, as that would be the behavior of a reckless man. The Starry Sky Pocket World can be considered a trump card. After coming out of the Dragon Soul Sacred Tower, I once again felt the existence of the power of the Starry Sky Inheritance. Not only did my comprehension of the Void attribute not weaken, it seems to have become stronger. This surprised Kang Xinmu. His increased comprehension of the spatial attribute Void energy allowed him to travel through space even faster and create independent spaces even faster. With his current speed, he could even create an independent space in time when he faced Hakuin's strongest attack. He didn't need to use other methods to buy time. If I were to encounter Hakuin in the outside world, it would be easy to defeat her. However, it would be too difficult to kill her. Right now, I still lack an effective way to kill my enemies. In a battle in an enclosed space, or in a situation where victory or defeat must be decided, I have a great advantage. However, in a life-and-death battle, it's still quite difficult to prevent the other party from escaping. This was especially so for someone like Hakuin, who had extremely strong spatial ability. If it was an ordinary person, Kang Xinmu's Star Rune's Void Imprisonment or Starry Sky Isolation would be able to seal the other party. However, this method would definitely not work on Hakuin. The blonde girl's understanding of the spatial attribute Void energy was too deep, even not inferior to Kang Xinmu's. This meant that Kang Xinmu could not use spatial methods to trap her. He had to consider that in the permanent intermediate ruins that he was about to head to, there would be opponents of the same level as Hakuin. That was the legacy of Emperor Hua. Since its discovery, it had been well received by the five forces, and many powerhouses had been exploring it. This time, Kang Xinmu did not necessarily need to explore it. The key was to see if he could obtain some strategic treasures, and at the same time, he could exchange pointers with the powerhouses of other races. After truly reaching the peak of the Dragon Emperor, Kang Xinmu would then break through to the Super Dragon God realm. This was very beneficial to his future cultivation. 3 days after leaving the Dragon Soul Holy Tower, the Black Dragon's consciousness and the ancient demon god's consciousness finally emerged from Kang Xinmu's mind. Obviously, they really did not dare to appear in the Dragon Soul Holy Tower. After all, their existence depended on Kang Xinmu. Once they were discovered in Kang Xinmu's body, it was very likely that Kang Xinmu would become the enemy of the entire Dragon God clan, and he might not be able to leave the Dragon Soul Holy Tower alive. In that case, wouldn't they only have a dead end? No matter what, they finally came out now. Moreover, they seemed to be wary of the Dragon Soul Holy Tower, but they were not particularly afraid. After all, after they hid their aura, the Dragon Soul Holy Tower could not detect their existence, so there was no need to worry about being discovered. This meant that their existence was far beyond the level of the Dragon Soul Holy Tower. Or in other words, the current level of the Dragon Soul Holy Tower was not known. If the Dragon Soul Holy Tower was stronger than this in the past, the 5th class disciple is first, and the 6th class disciple is tied for first. TSK, little brat, you did well. You can actually achieve such results without my guidance. You did not let me down. The ancient demon god knew the situation as soon as his consciousness came out. To him, the results that Kang Xinmu had achieved were not too strong. It could only be said to be average. After all, in the concept of the ancient demon god's consciousness, the entire Dragon God clan was nothing. To him, it was just an inferior clan. Even the demon god clan was just his people who served and worshipped him. What was the Dragon God clan? In his impression, the strength of such people could not be compared to Kang Xinmu. Kang Xinmu was a super genius that he had guided. Although he was currently cultivating the methods of the Dragon God clan, Kang Xinmu also cultivated the methods of the Demon God clan. It was just that he did not pay much attention to improving it at this stage. Everything had to wait for the other side to send more cultivation resources. The cultivation resources of the Demon God clan could not be found in the Dragon God clan world. Therefore, in recent days, Kang Xinmu's Demon God clan cultivation did not improve. As for the inheritance of the power of the starry sky, Kang Xinmu began to further comprehend it after he returned. Chapter 54:21. In fact, to Kang Xinmu, the biggest gain from the Dragon Soul Holy Pagoda this time was his compatibility with the formless armament Chen Xing. Originally, Kang Xinmu was looking for an opportunity to fight evenly matched opponents and coincidentally ran into the competition between the disciples of the Holy Lands. The results of the competition did not disappoint Jiang Shenwu. He had indeed encountered many powerful opponents, and the battles with these opponents had allowed him to become more compatible with the formless armament Chen Xing and integrate to a deeper level. If he could only use 30% of Chen Xing's power at the beginning, he could now use 80% of his power. This was a huge improvement. This meant that as long as he stepped into the transcendent level, he could use 80% of his power. By then, Chen Xing's power would be almost perfect. During these 7 days, the competition between the disciples of the Holy Lands continued. The competition between the 7th grade disciples and the 8th grade disciples, without the people from the Holy Lands deliberately causing trouble, the 5 extreme mysterious ice holy land performed well in the competition between the disciples of these 2 grades. Of course, those who reached the 7th grade were all existences at the 4th level of the transcendent God. It was difficult to say that these existences were disciples. Each of them was an important figure in their respective holy lands. For example, Gu Xinyue's father, the head of the Gu family, was a 7th grade disciple. Moreover, the strength of the 4th grade disciples was not that great. Basically, those who could win were all existences at the 6th level of the transcendent God. At the 7th grade disciple stage, there was no such thing as skipping levels. All the 7th grade disciples who participated in the competition had not reached the 7th level of the transcendent God. This was because those who reached the 7th level of the transcendent God were definitely 8th grade disciples. There was no doubt about this. Moreover, the further one went in the transcendent God stage, the greater the gap. This meant that if a 7th grade transcendent God were to sneak in, it was very likely that he would be first place. The gap between the late-stage transcendent God stage was even greater than before. Kang Xinmu did not pay much attention to these 2 stages of the competition. He did not know anyone in there. That level was still a little far from him for the time being. Don't look at how he had repeatedly used 9th grade transcendent God level attacks in the competition between the 6th grade disciples. This kind of attack was nothing more than a tickle to an elite class 7 disciple. What Kang Xinmu could unleash, as well as what Hakuin and the others could unleash, were only at the level of an ordinary 9th stage transcendent God. This was the most basic. Even a 7th stage transcendent God would be able to completely suppress Hakuin's level. Therefore, the realm was still very important. If Kang Xinmu was at the level of the super mystical dragon now, even if he was only at the 1st level, he could rely on his own strength to fight against Hakuin and even defeat her. Anyway, Kang Xinmu was going to explore the permanent middle-level relics, the relics of Emperor Enviwa. This relic was very important to Kang Xinmu. The consciousness of the ancestor of the ancient demon god had once said that the key part of Emperor Enviwa's inheritance was probably in the relics of Emperor Enviwa. Moreover, there would definitely be a lot of cultivation resources inside. Once he could obtain the resources inside, Kang Xinmu could completely unseal at least one more layer of the seal in the small starry sky world. If he wanted to rely on his usual accumulation to unseal the small starry sky world, he probably wouldn't be able to unseal one layer of the seal in 100 years. Next, to unseal the 4th layer of the seal in the small starry sky world, he would need at least 50 million gold dragon coins worth of cultivation resources. Many dragon martial artists couldn't earn so many cultivation resources in their lifetime. Previously, Moya had already gone to the military department of the dragon gods to ask for information about the relics of Emperor Enviwa's inheritance. She said that it would take about a month. She should be back soon. Kang Xinmu took some time to go to the small starry sky world and took a look at the princess of the Fu Shui clan, Qi Yan. This girl was imprisoned in the small starry sky world and couldn't even cultivate. It didn't matter to Kang Xinmu, but this girl was very anxious. How long was Kang Xinmu going to imprison her? For Kang Xinmu, keeping Qi Yan was naturally useful, especially in the inheritance of Emperor Enviwa. This time, the inheritance of Emperor Enviwa was a permanent intermediate relic. It was mainly controlled by the 5 major clans, and all 5 clans could send people to explore it. These 5 clans were the dragon gods, the demon gods, and the ancient phoenix. There was also the Fu Shui clan and the Thousand-Winged Snake clan. The Fu Shui clan and the Thousand-Winged Snake clan had colluded with each other, so they were considered opponents of the dragon gods. And the demon gods and the ancient phoenix clan joined forces with the dragon gods. Of course, this was all relative. Outsiders had no idea what really happened inside the permanent relic. It was not impossible for the dragon martial artists of the dragon gods to join forces with the Fu Shui clan and the Thousand-Winged Snake clan. If they really encountered something precious, there would be competition between the demon gods and the ancient Phoenix clan. There were many things that couldn't be divided equally. If I took it, you couldn't get it. Under such circumstances, allies were also unreliable. Kang Xinmu carried a princess of the Fu Shui clan with him. It might be useful at a critical moment. Of course, Kang Xinmu's current strength was completely superior to most Dragon Emperor peak experts. Before the Dragon Soul Holy Tower competition, he had already crushed most of the peak stage Dragon Emperors. Not to mention now. If it weren't for the existence of some freaks in this world, Kang Xinmu could even say that he had already surpassed the level of Dragon Emperor peak experts. He had already fought so many battles with Supreme God-level opponents, so there was no pressure to face the Dragon Emperor peak experts. But this didn't mean that the exploration of the inheritance of Emperor Enviwa was easy for him. After all, it was a relic exploration. In the relic, no one said that one could only fight one-on-one. It was likely that 4 or 5 opponents would join forces. If 4 or 5 Dragon Emperor peak experts joined forces, then Kang Xinmu would still be under a lot of pressure. After all, such elders explored intermediate relics all year round and had many treasures on them. If all of them were used, it would definitely cause a lot of trouble for Kang Xinmu. Speaking of the ancient Phoenix clan, will Murong Liani come? And Su Yi and Huang Yun from the Demon God clan. Su Yi and Huang Yun were both Demon God clan powerhouses that left a deep impression on Kang Xinmu. If they were together, Kang Xinmu could join forces with them. These two were quite interesting. Back then, they got to know each other through fighting with Kang Xinmu. Chapter 54-22. When the competition between the level 8 disciples of the Dragon Soul Holy Tower ended, Kang Xinmu finally met Emoya again. Emoya, a veiled woman with a soft voice, left a good impression on Kang Xinmu. Although he didn't know what she looked like, Kang Xinmu felt that a woman with such a beautiful voice must be extremely beautiful. She also cultivated the force of nature, so Kang Xinmu felt a sense of intimacy with her. In the Dragon God clan, there was no cultivation of the Dragon God clan, but they cultivated the force of nature. For the dragon warriors of the entire Dragon God clan, this was a relatively different existence. But in fact, Emoya was a well-deserved citizen of the Dragon God clan, and she had made a lot of contributions to the Dragon God clan. She brought detailed information about Emperor Envua's inheritance relic to Kang Xinmu, most of which were information and clues obtained by people in the last year's exploration of Emperor Envua's inheritance relic. This information was of great help to the exploration of Emperor Envua's inheritance relic. Emoya and Kang Xinmu studied this information together for 3 days. Only then did he gain a certain level of understanding of the inheritance ruins, and had a little more confidence in exploring the ruins. Of course, this inheritance relic was still in a semi-closed state. Until now, no one had been able to enter the inner part of this inheritance relic. Not to mention the inner part, no one had even entered the middle part. The entire inheritance relic was divided into the outer part, the middle part, and the inner part. More than half of the outer part had been explored, but no one had been able to enter the middle part and the inner part. It wasn't that no roads leading to the middle part and the inner part had been found. Instead, it was because these roads were all blocked. These roads were sealed by the array of Emperor Envua's inheritance. No one knew what methods were needed to unlock the seals, and no one knew whether they had to explore the entire outer part of the relic. All in all, there were a lot of cultivation resources stored in the outer part of the relic. Many dragon warriors and cultivators from the other 4 clans had obtained a lot of cultivation resources, which were worth hundreds of millions of gold dragon coins. Of course, with such a terrifying value, each cultivator who explored the ruins would not be able to get much. As for Kang Xinmu, he was more looking forward to the middle and inner parts of the ruins. At that time, perhaps he could see if there was any special way to enter the ruins. Others might not have a way, but Kang Xinmu might have a way. After all, his body contained the consciousness of two ancient existences. Their vast knowledge was not something that the other cultivators of the current era could compare to. After Kang Xinmu was ready, it was time to meet up with the other dragon warriors. The second person to go with Kang Xinmu was Emoya. She cultivated the force of nature, so this kind of power could be suppressed. She could enter the intermediate permanent relic with Kang Xinmu. This was also a chance for Kang Xinmu to understand Emoya's strength. Although Emoya's cultivation base was already very high and her strength was suppressed when she entered the ruins, he could also see how she would perform at the peak of the Dragon Emperor level. Apart from Emoya, there were also a few people who wanted to go with Kang Xinmu. Gu Xinue, Ran Ran, Xiao Bai, Xiao Yuhua, and Liang Xiao. The five of them were now at the peak of the Dragon Emperor level. In other words, even if they didn't reach the peak of the Dragon Emperor level, they could break through to the peak of the Dragon Emperor level in the near future. It might even happen within these 3 days. On the one hand, they had obtained good results in the Dragon Soul Towers competition and obtained cultivation resources that were hard to get. These cultivation resources were enough to push them to the peak of the Dragon Emperor level. On the other hand, even if one of them had bottlenecks, Kang Xinmu could help them break through the bottleneck. This was a heaven-defying ability that belonged to Kang Xinmu. Previously, Liang Xiao had already broken through with Kang Xinmu's help. Now, Kang Xinmu would make more use of this ability. After all, to him, the more friends he had, the stronger his cohesion and the overall strength of the team would be. This trip to Emperor Nuwa's inheritance ruins undoubtedly required teamwork. There were many things that definitely couldn't be solved by Kang Xinmu alone. Exploring the ruins wasn't something that could be done with a strong enough combat power. However, in order to explore the sacred land, Kang Xinmu invited another person. That was Yi Yin from the Hidden Death Sacred Land. There was no doubt about Yi Yin's strength, and like Kang Xinmu, he hadn't broken through to the Supreme God stage. It wasn't that he couldn't break through, but he felt that it wasn't the best time to do so. This time, Kang Xinmu invited him to explore the ruins because he was interested in Yi Yin's ability and strength. Yi Yin and Kang Xinmu cooperated well with each other. Moreover, their concealment ability had reached the peak. When exploring the ruins of Emperor Nuwa's inheritance, they might be able to play an unexpected role. Apart from other things, it would be great to let him explore the way ahead. Moreover, Yi Yin was particularly good in some aspects, such as formations. He would definitely be useful when exploring the ruins of Emperor Nuwa's inheritance. Originally, Kang Xinmu had sent a message to the Hidden Death Sacred Land just to give it a try. He didn't think that Yi Yin would really go with him. However, when Kang Xinmu was ready, Yi Yin came directly. He came to the Five Extremes Mysterious Ice Holy Land and found Kang Xinmu in the Five Extremes Mysterious Ice City, indicating that he was willing to participate in this activity. For him, first of all, Kang Xinmu was very strong. So, if he went with Kang Xinmu, he would be able to guarantee his safety and team competitiveness. For Yi Yin, the permanent middle-level ruins were undoubtedly a good source of wealth. The reason why he hadn't broken through his cultivation was that he wanted to explore more middle-level ruins. With his current strength, when exploring the permanent middle-level ruins, he was confident that he could even fight the strongest expert one-on-one. Therefore, he had explored them several times before, and the harvest was quite good. This time, Kang Xinmu invited him to explore the ruins of Emperor Nuwa's inheritance. It was definitely a good thing. After all, the ruins of Emperor Nuwa's inheritance were very popular among the permanent middle-level ruins. After all, they had just been discovered, and the central and inner parts had not been explored yet. However, if he wanted to explore the ruins of Emperor Nuwa's inheritance, he definitely needed a team. Yi Yin was usually alone, so he naturally didn't have a team. The only person who could fight with him was his senior sister, Hakwin, who had already reached level 3 transcendent god and couldn't enter the middle-level ruins. Therefore, Kang Xinmu's invitation was very timely for Yi Yin. Chapter 54-23. As soon as Yi Yin arrived, the candidates for the exploration this time were determined. Kang Xinmu, Moya, and Yi Yin. Including Gu Xinyue, Ran Ran, and the rest. If they were ranked according to their strength, Ran Ran and the rest would undoubtedly be ranked at the bottom. However, Gu Xinyue's strength wasn't easy to determine. She could only perform well when facing other cultivators. However, if she were to face some traps in Emperor Hua's inheritance, it would definitely be useless. When she was in the Dragon Soul Tower, her nightmare dragon power was useful against the Dragon Soul golems. This was considered an accident. Perhaps the seniors in the Dragon Soul Tower didn't want her ability to be buried. However, in the outside world, her nightmare dragon power was absolutely useless against inanimate objects. The possibility of it working against the traps in Emperor Hua's inheritance was extremely low. In terms of head-on combat strength, Kang Xinmu and Moya were undoubtedly the strongest, followed by Yi Yin and Ran Ran. Although Ran Ran didn't get first place in the competition among the class 4 disciples, she had used cultivation resources to greatly improve herself after coming out. Therefore, her current strength was about the same as Yi Yin's. At least in terms of head-on combat strength, she was definitely on par with Yi Yin's. Moreover, she cultivated a head-on dragon martial technique similar to Kang Xinmu's. She cultivated all kinds of body-tempering dragon martial techniques as if she didn't care about her life. With the powerful recovery effect of the dark dragon filth controlling skill, her cultivation efficiency was also very good. Although she wasn't as resilient as Kang Xinmu, she was already quite terrifying among ordinary dragon martial artists. The physical defense of her divine dragon body was already equivalent to the level of some peak dragon emperor's defensive dragon martial techniques. If she were to fight, her defense would become even stronger. Kang Xinmu hadn't seen her perform for a long time. This time, he could cooperate with them. In addition, although Xiao Bai, Xiao Yuhua, and Liang Xiao were not as strong as them, they had cooperated with Kang Xinmu for a long time. Sometimes, when there was a need to cooperate, they were well-deserved candidates. Moreover, the strength of the 3 of them, compared to the ordinary Dragon Emperor at his peak, was completely beyond that. Of course, compared to the old men who explored the intermediate permanent ruins all year round, they were definitely inferior. However, the exploration of Emperor Hua's inheritance relic this time was not a one-on-one battle, but a group battle. In a group battle, with the same number of people, Kang Xinmu was more than enough to fight against 3 people. If they were to fight against 1 person, they would also be more than enough. In this way, Kang Xinmu and the others would definitely win in a group battle. After the candidates were decided, it was time to set off. Moya had already set a time for the exchange with the military. On the day the final results of the Dragon Soul Holy Tower competition came out, Kang Xinmu and the other 7 people set off together for the Chaos Battlefield. Along the way, they discussed the final results of the Dragon Soul Holy Ground. The final rankings of each Holy Ground were similar to what everyone had expected. The results of the competition between the 7th to 9th grade disciples were more or less the same. The points obtained by each holy ground were more or less the same. This was because although there were differences in the newly recruited disciples of each holy ground, in terms of high-end strength, they were actually on par. The 9th grade disciples were all at the peak of the Supreme God level. Whether it was in the 5 extreme mysterious ice holy ground or other holy grounds, they were all little elders. Therefore, there weren't many 9th grade disciples participating. The 5 extreme mysterious ice holy ground only had a dozen or so dragon martial artists. Under such circumstances, the results of each holy ground wouldn't be too different. Of course, there were still some minor differences. The overall strength of the 5 extreme mysterious ice holy ground wasn't the strongest. Therefore, in the end, the 5 extreme mysterious ice holy ground ranked second overall. The hidden death holy ground was slightly weaker and ranked fourth overall. This was because the hidden death holy ground had fewer dragon martial artists than the 5 extreme mysterious ice holy ground. Moreover, they cultivated more concealment techniques. In this kind of arena battle, many people couldn't display their full potential. Hakuin was already an exception. Generally speaking, there were very few people in the hidden death holy ground who could pass the second round of defense. After the final rankings were announced, the Dragon Soul Holy Tower would naturally reward each holy ground according to their contributions. The second-ranked 5 extreme mysterious ice holy ground would definitely receive a lot of benefits. Moreover, with this ranking, it would be much easier to recruit new disciples in the future. The 5 extreme mysterious ice holy ground wasn't the kind that only recruited dragon martial artists who had the same inheritance as themselves. Instead, they were willing to accept anyone as long as they were willing to join. Therefore, although the 5 extreme mysterious ice holy ground was overall stronger, the dragon martial artists under its banner were more heterogeneous. On the contrary, there weren't many true inheritors of the 5 extreme mysterious ice force. They only accounted for less than a tenth of the dragon martial artists in the 5 extreme mysterious ice holy ground. Kang Shinmu also knew an inheritor of the 5 extreme mysterious ice force. However, she was still in the dragon martial continent and her cultivation hadn't risen yet. She was the Shi sisters from back then. Shi Yueying cultivated the 5 extreme mysterious ice force. Kang Shinmu hadn't seen her for a long time, but he heard that she was cultivating with the devouring dragon group and her cultivation speed was also very fast. The next time they met, her cultivation would probably give Kang Shinmu a big shock. In any case, Kang Shinmu and the others only discussed the holy ground's rankings along the way. After all, to them, the overall ranking of the holy grounds didn't affect them much. The only thing that could affect them was the rewards that the Dragon Soul Holy Tower gave out to each holy ground. After all, they had contributed greatly to their respective holy grounds' current rankings. Especially Kang Shinmu. If Kang Shinmu hadn't won first place twice, the 5 extreme mysterious ice holy ground probably wouldn't even have made it into the top 10. Kang Shinmu's 2 first places were very important for the 5 extreme mysterious ice holy ground to gain points. Finally, 5 days later, Kang Shinmu and the others followed the experts of the Dragon God Military Department and finally came to the entrance of Emperor Wa's inheritance relic in the chaotic battlefield. The entrance of Emperor Wa's inheritance relic was an underground abyss. The entrances of the mid-level relics that Kang Shinmu had seen were all on the mountain walls. But Emperor Wa's inheritance relic was on the ground, in an abyss below. Of course, this abyss was excavated by other cultivators to make it more convenient to enter Emperor Wa's inheritance relic. Outside Emperor Wa's inheritance relic, there were experts of the 5 major clans guarding it, which could effectively prevent cultivators of other clans from sneaking in. This was the inheritance relic of the 5 major clans. From this relic, the 5 major clans had found a lot of valuable resources. From this point of view, no clan would let other people in. Wouldn't it be cutting off their own source of wealth if they let other people in? Among the major clans, no matter how friendly they were, there was a competitive relationship. Chapter 54-24. When Kang Shinmu and the other 7 people came over with the experts of the Dragon God clan, they attracted a lot of people's attention. After all, this was a public permanent relic. Anyone who wanted to enter the relic was a competitor of others. Therefore, Kang Shinmu and the other 7 people were soon noticed. However, it was obvious that many people didn't pay attention to the appearance of the 8 people. The relationship between the Fu Shui clan and the Thousand-Winged Snake clan and the Dragon God clan was not very good. At this moment, seeing the arrival of Kong Shinmu and the others, even a supreme expert in charge directly mocked them. Dragon God Clan, you little babies also came to explore the relic of Emperor Nvua's inheritance? You think too much, Only the strong were qualified to explore the permanent relic. If the weak entered it, they would only die. Generally speaking, only middle-aged or even old Dragon Emperor Peak would be responsible for the exploration of the permanent relic. But, now the Dragon God Clan actually sent 8 young people? If there was a young man among the group of experts, it was still possible. After all, there were also strong young people. However, these 8 people were all young people, so it was impossible for all 8 of them to be very strong. This was something they were very sure of. Where could they find so many super geniuses to explore the same permanent relic together? Even if there were so many geniuses, they might not all be able to come together and become friends. This was also normal. In fact, among the 8 people, including Kong Shinmu, there were a few people who were not strong enough in frontal combat, such as Xiao Bai, Xiao Yuhua, and Liang Xiao. However, in fact, their combat capability was not weak, but there was a little gap between them and the top Dragon Emperor Peak. In this way, not every old man at the Dragon Emperor Peak could have the top combat capability. After all, it required a very high comprehension. Even if it was only the Dragon Emperor Peak, not everyone could become invincible at this realm. Liang Xiao and the others, even if they were not as strong as some Dragon Emperor Peak super experts, it was absolutely no problem for them to explore the relic of Emperor Nvua's inheritance. At the very least, he wouldn't be a burden. Moreover, he and Kong Shinmu understood and were familiar with each other, so it would be easier for them to work together. Of course, people from other races would not think so. Moreover, they could not see the strength of Kong Shinmu and the rest from the surface. No one could estimate what kind of combat power a peak Dragon Emperor had. Was it only the peak of the Dragon Emperor, or had it reached the first stage of the Transcendent God stage? Or had he reached an even higher level? Generally speaking, it was normal for ordinary young geniuses to have the strength of a first-stage Transcendent God when the Dragon Emperor was at his peak. This was the level of Liang Xiao and the others. Dragon Emperor had the strength of a first-stage Transcendent God at his peak. In reality, he could be called a genius. In the entire 5 extreme Black Ice Holy Land, there weren't many such geniuses. In the past, Gu Xinyue was also at this level, but now, Gu Xinyue had surpassed this level. If she really fought with someone, even a third-stage Transcendent God might be at a disadvantage. As for Yi Yin, he was about the same level. He wasn't really strong, but it was easy for him to deal with a third-stage Transcendent God. Not to mention Kong Shinmu. Kong Shinmu could fight against a fourth-stage Transcendent God now. Even if he encountered a fifth-stage Transcendent God, he would still be able to fight. In the ruins of Emperor Wa's inheritance, he could be considered a tyrant. Not many Dragon Emperors at the peak of the Dragon Emperor stage could have such strength. Even those old fellows couldn't do it. There was also Emoya. Emoya's strength was even more unfathomable. This veiled girl was a supreme power of nature cultivator in the outside world. Even if her strength was suppressed in the ruins of Emperor Wa's inheritance, an ordinary peak Dragon Emperor couldn't compare to her. So what if her strength was suppressed to that of a peak Dragon Emperor? Emoya was someone who had the ability to challenge those above her level. Needless to say, the power of nature itself was very strong, and ordinary people couldn't control it. Therefore, with the 4 of them around, it wouldn't be a problem to bring Ran Ran, Xiao Bai, and the other 3 with them. They wouldn't be a burden at all, but they were relatively weak, but this was only relative to Kong Shinmu and the others. If the 4 of them worked together, it would be easy to deal with 1 or 2 peak Dragon Emperor elders. Even if there were 3 or 4 of them, they had their own life-saving methods, so they didn't need Kong Shinmu and the others to worry too much. However, although Kong Shinmu knew that he was very strong, he didn't underestimate the other experts who could explore the ruins of Emperor Wa's inheritance. At this moment, he was observing the surrounding camps. In the camps of the various clans, there were many cultivators resting. These cultivators were basically all elderly. Some were elderly, some were middle-aged, and occasionally, there would be young figures. However, they would not be as many as 8 at once like Jiang Shenwu and the others. Those cultivators were all at the peak Dragon Emperor level, and they were more or less injured. Because they were injured, they were recuperating outside the ruins. These people were different from the supreme expert who had just mocked them. No matter what kind of existence Kang Xinmu and the others were, as long as they entered the ruins of Emperor Wa's inheritance, they were their enemies and competitors. They hadn't gained much from exploring the ruins, but there were a lot of fights. Because of this, they were injured and recuperating outside, and they could only enter the ruins again after a month or 2. This was also one of the important reasons that hindered them from exploring the ruins. So these people looked at the arrival of Kang Xinmu and the others with vigilance and solemnity. Obviously, they didn't think that those who could be selected by the Dragon God clan to explore the intermediate permanent ruins would be weak. Kang Xinmu and the others must have the corresponding strength. As for their strength, it was hard to say for the time being, but anyway, it wouldn't be a waste of places. After all, although the 5 clans nominally occupied the exploration rights of this ruins, the number of places allocated to each clan was not many. Since the 5 clans wanted to explore together, there must be a certain limit. For example, because the ruins of Emperor Wa's inheritance were newly developed and still in the exploration stage, the 5 clans agreed that each clan could only have 60 places to enter every month. If there were more than 60, they could only wait for the next month. So, if they didn't have the real strength, Kang Xinmu and the others couldn't get the places at all. As for the places, it must be Moya who communicated with the military headquarters of the Dragon God clan. Are they the ones who took our places? When Kang Xinmu and the others arrived, there were several middle-aged experts in the camp of the Dragon God clan, looking at Kang Xinmu and the others with some hostility.